This video will go through Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban and show you everything the movie left out. When referencing events from the books, we'll use artwork. For example, the movie left out the real history of the Marauders' backstory, Gryffindor winning the Quidditch Cup for the first time in many years, Harry facing off against Cho Chang in Ravenclaw for the first time, and Cedric Diggory as well, the importance of Hermione's cat Crookshanks, and more. With all that in mind, let's begin. Chapter 1, Owlpost. Late at night, Harry Potter is hiding under his bedsheets with a book, a torchlight, ink, quill, and parchment, working on an essay for school. The topic is the medieval witch hunts. It isn't easy. He has to make sure he doesn't leave any ink stains on the sheets and remains quiet, as his relatives, the Dursleys, are terrified of magic. They would likely lock him up in the cupboard under the stairs if they knew he was writing a paper on the subject under their roof. Harry recalls how the Dursleys confiscated all his magical tools at the start of the summer holidays, only for him to sneak some back when the opportunity arose. He didn't use magic to retrieve them, since it's forbidden for underage wizards outside school. Instead, he picked the cupboard's lock where the Dursleys had stashed his books and tools. Harry is being more cautious than usual now because he's already on thin ice with the Dursleys. Earlier that summer, his friend Ron Weasley called the Dursley house, which infuriated Harry's uncle, Vernon. Ron's lack of understanding of how telephones work and his shouting throughout the conversation only made things worse. After the phone call, Harry had been severely reprimanded for giving the number of the Dursley house to other wizards. Now, after completing the paragraph on Wendelin the Weird, a witch who enjoyed being burned at the stake, something that didn't actually harm witches or wizards, Harry decides to stop for the night. Crawling out from under the sheets, he realizes it's just after midnight, meaning he has turned 13. However, this doesn't fill him with excitement as it might other children. Based on previous birthdays, he expects nothing. The Dursleys have always treated him with indifference, especially on such occasions. Harry walks to the window to enjoy the cool night air, thinking about his owl, Hedwig, who is out hunting. Although owls serve as postal couriers in the wizarding world, Harry had to promise the Dursleys he wouldn't send any letters with Hedwig before they allowed him to let her out to hunt. As he stares at the night sky, Harry's thoughts turn into his parents and their killer, Lord Voldemort, who attempted to murder him when he was a baby, leaving him with a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. Voldemort has tried to end Harry's life twice since then, with the latest attempt only a few weeks previous, but has failed each time. While scanning the sky, hoping to catch sight of Hedwig, Harry notices something flying in front of the moon. It doesn't look like an owl. As the shape draws closer, Harry steps aside to let it enter through the window. Not one owl, but 3 of them, 2 carrying an unconscious third, land on Harry's bed. The injured one is Errol, the Weasley family's aging bird, while one of the others appears to be from Hogwarts, Harry's school. The third is Hedwig, Harry's own snowy white owl. All 3 birds have parcels tied to their legs. The tawny one from Hogwarts takes off immediately after Harry collects its package. Harry tends to Errol, who seems weak but is slowly recovering from the journey. Harry opens Errol's package first. Inside, he finds a birthday present, a card, and a newspaper clipping. Seeing the moving figures in the photograph, Harry deduces that it's from the Daily Prophet. The clipping informs him that the Weasley family has won a significant amount of gold from the Daily Prophet Prize Galleon draw, which they used for a month-long holiday in Egypt to visit their eldest son, Bill. Ron's birthday card offers more details, saying Egypt is amazing and telling him about the tombs his brother Bill opened as a curse breaker. Although most of the prize money went toward the holiday, some will be used to buy Ron a new wand. Harry recalls the night Ron's old wand broke during an accident involving a flying car and a tree. As a postscript, Ron mentions that his brother Percy has been made head boy at Hogwarts. Ron's package contains a sneakoscope, a spinner-like object that lights up and spins when a suspicious person is nearby. However, when Harry places it on his bedside table, it remains still. Hedwig's parcel is from Hermione. In her letter, she explains that she wasn't sure how to send her gift from France, where she's vacationing with her family, worried it might be opened at the border. Luckily, Hedwig solved that problem for her. Hermione writes about her holiday and how her research made her essay on witch hunts much too long. She also mentions Percy's promotion to head boy and the Weasleys' trip to Egypt, with some jealousy, as she thinks Ron can learn a lot there. Although Harry expects a book from Hermione, knowing her, he is surprised to find a broomstick servicing kit instead. As a skilled Quidditch player with his own racing broom, this is a perfect gift for him. The last package is from Hagrid, as Harry can tell by the barely legible handwriting. Inside, something seems to have jaws and Harry hears it snap shut. While he trusts Hagrid wouldn't send him anything truly dangerous, Harry also knows Hagrid has unusual ideas about what's considered safe. The man is well known for adoring dragons and keeping flesh-eating giant spiders as pets. Cautiously, Harry opens the package to reveal a book titled The Monster Book of Monsters. True to its name, the book attacks Harry, trying to bite him. After a struggle, Harry manages to restrain it by wrapping a belt around its covers and securing it shut. Hoping the Dursleys didn't hear the commotion, Harry opens Hagrid's letter. It's brief, explaining that Harry will need the book for school and wishing him a happy birthday. Though Harry finds the note suspicious, he is still grateful for the gift and card. The final letter in the package is from Hogwarts, signed by Deputy Headmistress Professor McGonagall. It doesn't mention Harry's birthday, but includes his book list for the upcoming term and details about the Hogwarts Express. It also informs him that as a third-year student, he's allowed to visit Hogsmeade, the only village in Great Britain inhabited entirely by witches and wizards. Harry's excitement dims. He knows the Dursleys are unlikely to sign the permission slip required for him to visit. They would refuse simply to make him miserable. Deciding to deal with that problem in the morning, Harry goes to bed, for once feeling happy on his birthday. In the movie, the film includes very little from this chapter, only showing Harry under his blanket attempting to perform a Lumos Maximus spell to illuminate his room. Uncle Vernon, suspecting Harry is up to something, tries to catch him by bursting through the door. This contradicts the book, where it's clearly stated that underage wizards aren't allowed to use magic during the summer holidays. This movie's director, Alfonso Cuarón, has a distinct style compared to the previous two films by Chris Columbus. Alfonso trades Columbus's warm, inviting color palette for cooler, darker tones, giving the film a more ominous atmosphere. The world in Alfonso's adaptation feels worn down, slightly sinister, and as if it's in a state of decline. Chapter 2: Aunt Marge's Big Mistake. The next morning, Harry finds the three Dursleys, Aunt Petunia, Uncle Vernon, and their son Dudley, in the kitchen. The new TV, a request from Dudley who finds walking from the living room to the fridge tiresome, is on. The newscaster reports on an escaped prisoner named Black. Harry, whose unruly hair is unacceptable according to his uncle, thinks he appears well kept compared to the long-haired, neglected convict on the screen. Uncle Vernon expresses concern that the report doesn't specify where Black escaped from, insisting the man could be outside their house for all they know. Aunt Petunia checks the street through the kitchen window, hoping to spot the prisoner strolling down Privet Drive. Harry thinks she would relish the opportunity to call the police, as she enjoys meddling in others' affairs. Uncle Vernon asserts that law enforcement should recognize that people like Black deserve a swift end rather than imprisonment. Aunt Petunia agrees. Once the topic of Black is exhausted, Vernon brings up Aunt Marge, and Harry, hoping for a negative answer, asks if she plans to visit. He recalls various occasions when Uncle Vernon's sister tormented him, most recently a year before he started at Hogwarts. Vernon informs him that Marge will stay for a week and warns Harry not to be rude or use any magic around her, nor mention it. He tells Harry that to Marge's best knowledge, he attends a school for troublesome children called St. Brutus's Secure Center for Incurably Criminal Boys. Upon being asked, Dudley refuses to join his father for the ride to the train station, opting instead to continue watching TV. Harry, however, gets up and follows Uncle Vernon. He tells his uncle about Hogsmeade and the permission form, arguing that beating him up won't make Aunt Marge forget about magic, should he accidentally let something slip. He promises, however, to keep quiet about his true nature if Vernon agrees to sign the form. Reluctantly, Uncle Vernon agrees, and Harry heads to his room to send Hedwig and Errol to Ron's for the week, knowing the owls would reveal his weirdness. Hedwig does not hide her disapproval at this. Soon, Uncle Vernon's car pulls up outside. Harry opens the door and gets knocked in the stomach by Aunt Marge's suitcase for his troubles. Marge is the female version of the robust Vernon, right down to the moustache. Ignoring Harry, Marge greets Dudley and Petunia. She brings along her old, bad-tempered bulldog, Ripper. After spending as long as possible with Marge's luggage, Harry joins the Dursleys in the kitchen. Aunt Marge immediately attacks him verbally, insisting he should be grateful to Vernon and Petunia for providing him with a home. She claims she would have sent him to an orphanage without hesitation. Harry thinks he would be better off, but remains silent as her tirade continues. Marge hopes St. Brutus still uses corporal punishment and advises Petunia to authorize extreme measures in dealing with Harry. Sensing trouble, Uncle Vernon quickly changes the subject. The days of Aunt Marge's visit pass in a similar manner. At one point, she blames Harry's shortcomings on his mother, Petunia's sister. That goes too far. In response, Harry makes her glass explode in her hand, but Marge dismisses it, believing she simply grips glasses too tightly. Vernon and Petunia still suspect magic. To distract himself during Marge's conversations, Harry focuses on the Handbook of Do-It-Yourself Broom Care from Hermione's gift kit. This strategy works reasonably well, but it gives him the appearance of a somewhat slow-witted child, a suspicion Aunt Marge is quick to voice. Finally, Marge's last evening at Privet Drive arrives. Petunia pulls out all the stops for dinner, which Marge appreciates, and thanks to Vernon, wine and brandy flow freely. Aunt Marge, quite intoxicated, confronts Harry, first comparing him unfavorably to the overweight Dudley, and then once again blaming his parents. She asks about his father's profession, and Vernon claims James was unemployed. Marge finds this both amusing and believable and continues to berate James Potter. This is too much for Harry, who, frustrated and forgetting the rules of the handbook, reacts. Shouting ensues, with Harry insisting his father wasn't unemployed and that his parents didn't die in a car crash as the Dursleys claim. The situation escalates and Aunt Marge begins to inflate like a balloon, shocking the Dursleys and her dog. Leaving the panicking Dursley family and the floating Aunt Marge behind, Harry storms out and retrieves his trunk and other possessions. He uses magic this time, no longer caring about the consequences. Vernon catches up with him in the foyer, demanding he reverse Aunt Marge's balloon state. Harry refuses, saying she deserves it, and threatens Uncle Vernon with his wand before dragging his trunk behind him. He leaves the house. In the movie, the film retains much of the chapter's essence, but changes some elements for pacing. Marge is just as rude and insufferable as in the book, if not more so. Notably, while the book portrays Harry's use of magic as involuntary, the film presents it as a deliberate act. With an angry expression and lights flickering around him, Harry appears to be letting his emotions get the better of him. Moreover, the scene of Aunt Marge's inflation relies on practical effects rather than CGI, with only her floating away and some string removal being used. Chapter 3: The Night Bus. Lugging his heavy trunk, Harry walks street after street. It isn't until he sits on a wall in Magnolia Crescent 10 minutes later that he starts to feel scared. Panic sets in. He is left home with no place to go, and he has broken wizarding law by performing magic and attacking a muggle. He knows his Hogwarts career is likely over, and the Ministry of Magic will soon be searching for him if they aren't already. Ron and Hermione would help him, but from their letters, Harry knows they are both abroad. Without Hedwig, he can't even write to them. With no assistance in sight, Harry devises a plan. He will use his broomstick to fly to London, withdraw his money from the bank, and disappear for good. However, the plan never comes to fruition. As he bends over his trunk, searching for his invisibility cloak, Harry senses someone watching him. He turns around and magics a light onto the end of his wand, revealing a large dog-like creature. Instinctively, he steps back and stumbles over the open trunk, landing in a rain gutter. As he lies there, he sees a vehicle coming, appearing out of nowhere. He narrowly avoids being run over by a triple-decker bus parked now next to the footpath. It is purple, just like the uniform of the conductor, who introduces himself as Stan Shunpike and explains that Harry has hailed the night bus, the favorite public transportation of witches and wizards, by raising his wand when he fell. Stan asks why Harry is on the ground, and Harry tells him about the enormous dog-like creature. However, the spot where it stood is now deserted. Stan notices Harry's scar, but Harry hides it behind his hair and claims his name is Neville Longbottom, hoping to complicate matters for the Ministry if they are searching for him. Soon, he boards the night bus with Stan's help and pays the fare, stating he wants to go to London. It turns out the magical bus can take him anywhere, as long as it's not overseas. After settling on a bed near the front, Harry meets the driver, an old man with thick glasses named Ernie Prang. With a loud noise, the bus departs and, in mere seconds, arrives in Wales. Initially, Harry worries about Ernie's apparent incompetence as a driver, but he soon realizes that objects on the streets, like lampposts and mailboxes, leap out of the way on their own. Unable to sleep, Harry wonders if Aunt Marge is still floating under the ceiling of the Dursleys' kitchen. Stan soon produces the Daily Prophet, and Harry quickly recognizes the man on the front page, Black, the escaped convict from the Muggle News. He tells Stan where he saw Black, and the conductor condescendingly explains that Black is, in fact, a dark wizard. Then he lends the newspaper to Harry. From the article, Harry learns that Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban after 12 years of imprisonment. He killed 13 people with a single curse and is considered so dangerous that Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic, warned the Muggle Prime Minister about him. Harry thinks Black looks like a vampire. After returning the Daily Prophet, Stan tells Harry that Sirius Black was a follower of you-know-who. Harry then says Voldemort's name, causing Ernie to steer the night bus into a building which promptly moves away, letting the bus pass unscathed. Stan appears rattled, as most ordinary wizards and witches are when they hear the Dark Lord's real name. After apologizing, Harry asks for the full story, and Stan and Ernie recount how, after you-know-who's fall, Black was hunted down. Refusing to surrender, he blew up half a street, killing a wizard and 12 muggles. The Ministry sold the incident to Muggle authorities as a gas explosion. After the gruesome act, Sirius Black apparently lost his mind and allowed the Ministry officers to take him away while laughing uncontrollably. Once their reminiscing concludes, Stan adds that nobody has escaped Azkaban before, but even so, Black has little chance of evading the prison guards much longer. Ernie, clearly fearful of the guards, urges Stan to change the subject. Harry is now concerned that he might end up in Azkaban like Black for inflating Aunt Marge, and he fears Stan will entertain the bus passengers with his story in the days to come. When everyone else leaves the bus, it's Harry's turn. He asks to be dropped off at the Leaky Cauldron, the Wizarding Inn in London. Upon arrival, none other than the Minister for Magic awaits him. Stan and Ernie learn Harry's true identity, and Fudge leads Harry inside the inn, asking Tom, the keeper, for a private room. Once in there, Fudge introduces himself unnecessarily, as Harry has seen him before while being invisible. Over tea and biscuits, Fudge tells Harry that Aunt Marge has been deflated and her memories of the incident erased. He adds that the Dursleys, though angry, are willing to see him next summer if he stays in the inn for the rest of the holiday and spends Christmas at school. Confused, Harry asks about his punishment, insisting he broke the law. The minister dismisses it, stating that blowing up an aunt isn't a big deal. Harry reminds him that last summer he received an official warning just because a house elf levitated a cake in the Dursley house. Fudge seems to hide something, then goes to the offensive, asking if Harry wants to be punished. Harry finally backs down. Just now, it occurs to him that having the Minister for Magic personally dealing with a young wizard's antics is unusual. After renting him a room, Fudge advises Harry not to return to the Muggle world and to stay in Diagon Alley, which opens from the back of the Leaky Cauldron. Harry agrees, though Fudge again refuses to explain why. Curious about Sirius Black, Harry asks for the latest news, and Fudge assures him that the Azkaban guards will catch Black soon. He looks just as frightened of them as Ernie was. Finally, Harry mentions the Hogsmeade permission form, which Uncle Vernon never signed. Fudge says he cannot sign it, stating that he isn't a relative, despite being the Minister for Magic. After Fudge leaves, Harry is shown to his room, where Hedwig is already waiting. Exhausted, he soon falls asleep. In the movie, this chapter is largely retained in the film, with dialogue directly lifted from the novel. Aunt Marge is worse off here. Instead of floating under the ceiling, she appears drifting in the night sky as Harry walks away from Privet Drive. Unlike the book, the night bus doesn't roam the countryside. Instead, it navigates the traffic of London. The film plays Ernie's poor driving for comedy, with Harry falling over multiple times as the bus performs magical stunts to avoid collisions. This version of Stan Shunpike is more brusque, showing impatience with Harry. Another change is that instead of 2 weeks, Harry only has one night at the inn, and Fudge has already bought his books, which he gives to Harry. Thus, Harry receives the Monster Book of Monsters, which in the novel is a birthday present from Hagrid. Chapter 4: The Leaky Cauldron. Harry enjoys his limited freedom in the Leaky Cauldron and on Diagon Alley. Surrounded by other witches and wizards, not to mention a variety of other creatures, he finishes his homework and explores the wizarding shopping street, where he tries not to spend his entire inheritance on things he doesn't need. Though many magical objects catch his eyes, one item in particular tempts him: a brand new racing broom. It's called Firebolt, and according to the sign in the shop Quality Quidditch Supplies, it's even better than Harry's own top-tier Nimbus 2000. Assuming an astronomical price tag, however, he decides against buying the broom. Careful financial decisions aside, he has to spend some of his gold on school equipment. New robes, potion ingredients, and books are required for the new term. On arriving at Flourish and Blotts, the bookshop on Diagon Alley, Harry notices many copies of his birthday present from Hagrid, the Monster Book of Monsters. As his own, these books are also moving on their own accord, fighting one another in the cage they are displayed in. When the shop clerk is told that he doesn't have to catch one of them for Harry, the man is relieved and proceeds to tell him how inconvenient the monster books are, comparing them to another tome about invisibility, of which every single copy has disappeared. While acquiring his other new books, Harry spots a cover with a black dog on it. This reminds him of the one he had seen back in Little Whinging, and the clerk warns him not to buy the book, as it is an unsettling read about bad omens. Harry heeds the clerk's advice and leaves the book at the shop. Back in his room, Harry convinces himself that the omen on the book cover couldn't have been the dog he saw. With September drawing close, he keeps an eye out for Ron and Hermione. While they remain absent, Harry runs into other schoolmates over the days, such as Dean Thomas, Seamus Finnegan, and Neville Longbottom. After giving up on meeting them before the train journey the next day, Harry is hailed by Ron and Hermione on the last day of the summer vacation while strolling Diagon Alley. The friends reunite at the ice cream shop where Harry had finished his paper on witch hunting. It soon turns out that Ron and Hermione know what happened to Aunt Marge through Ron's father, Mr. Weasley, who works at the Ministry. Harry's two friends have very different views of the events. While Ron is amused, Hermione points out that Harry could have been expelled from Hogwarts. That raises the question of why he wasn't. Ron assumes it's because he's Harry Potter, adding that if he, Ron, would do anything similar, the Ministry of Magic and his mother both would bear down on him hard. When Harry asks if they are done shopping, Ron shows off his new wand and remarks how weird the monster book is. Hermione, who has 3 times more new books than Ron, lists the subjects she will be taking in the new term. Ron is having a hard time understanding why Hermione, who's Muggle-born, wants to attend Muggle studies, and Harry voices worries about her schedule too. Instead of answering those, Hermione says she still has some money left and she would like to buy an owl. At Harry's suggestion, the friends head to the pet menagerie, where she can buy an owl and Ron can have his ailing rat, Scabbers, looked at. Upon entering Magical Menagerie, Ron tells the witch behind the counter that he's worried about his pet rat. The witch offers Ron a new one, as she suspects Scabbers is dying of old age. When the boy refuses, she produces some medicine instead. At this moment, something called Crookshanks by the witch attacks Ron and then goes for Scabbers. The rat escapes, escaping the shop, and Ron and Harry follow it, leaving behind Hermione to buy her owl. After the boys recover the terrified rat, they try to guess what attacked it, as it was in their opinion too big to be a normal cat. Soon, they catch up with Hermione, who's holding the culprit, Crookshanks, a big orange creature. Ron isn't happy with her purchase, but she is overjoyed with her new cat and says Crookshanks will stay in her room, so Scabbers won't be in any danger. Returning to the inn, Harry, Ron, and Hermione meet Mr. Weasley, who's reading the Daily Prophet. Harry, facing the escaped murderer Sirius Black's photo once again, asks the older wizard if the Ministry has any leads on him, but the answer is negative. Ron asks if there is a reward for catching the murderer, but his father scolds him, saying that Black is way too dangerous for a 13-year-old kid, but the guards of Azkaban will no doubt catch him soon. The rest of the Weasley family arrives, all greeting Harry warmly, though in Ginny's case, who has a huge crush on Harry, somewhat awkwardly. Soon, the little company is having a good-natured dinner. During the 5-course meal, Fred and George are making fun of the newly appointed head boy, Percy. At one point, Harry learns that the Ministry will send cars for them so they can reach King's Cross comfortably, and Mr. Weasley acts a little suspicious as to why. This news seems to surprise everyone else. After dinner, once the Weasleys, Hermione, and Harry have all retired, Harry hears noises. It's Ron and Percy in the room next door. The older boy accuses Ron of stealing his head boy badge, despite Ron having a missing item, Scabbers' medicine, himself. Harry offers to check if Ron left the rat tonic downstairs where they dined and leaves. On his way down, he hears another argument between Mr. and Mrs. Weasley this time, behind closed doors. Embarrassed, he wants to sneak away when he hears his own name. It turns out Sirius Black had escaped from Azkaban only to kill him. Mr. Weasley thinks Harry is mature enough to deal with the truth, while Mrs. Weasley wants to protect him, arguing that Hogwarts is the safest place in the world, and it would make no sense to scare the boy if he's safe anyway. Her husband isn't so sure, recalling that on more than one occasion when Harry managed to get into trouble inside the school, and adding that they thought Azkaban was impossible to escape to. As an answer to those worries, Mrs. Weasley brings up the headmaster of the school, Albus Dumbledore. Unable to reach a conclusion, the Weasleys go to sleep, and Harry can finally search for the rat medicine, which he finds immediately. On his way back, he also spots Percy's head boy badge in the possession of Fred and George, who has transformed it to say Big Head Boy instead. After returning the rat tonic to Ron, Harry goes back to his room. Thinking about the overheard argument, he now understands Fudge's request for him to stay in Diagon Alley, and the cars the Ministry was about to send as well, all for his safety. Harry sides with Mrs. Weasley on one thing. Seems logical that if the Dark Lord himself, Voldemort, was afraid of Dumbledore, his faithful servant, Sirius Black, would be too. On the other hand, he reflects that Mrs. Weasley sees him as a helpless child, while he, in fact, he has fought Lord Voldemort 3 times already, and so far he has survived. Harry is also wondering about those guards Mr. Weasley had mentioned, as he noticed that whoever talked about them was afraid of them. With Dumbledore on board and deeming Sirius Black a lesser threat than his master, Harry realizes that he is more annoyed than scared. As the way things are, with all the extra security in place, he will be perfectly safe, but he has no chance of visiting Hogsmeade Village next to the school. Lastly, he remembers the black dog he had seen back at home, and the other one on the cover of the book about deadly omens. He tells his mirror that he's not afraid and he's not going to be murdered, and the mirror cheers on his good spirit. In the movie, this chapter is almost entirely missing from the movie version. When we first see Crookshanks, he's already at the Leaky Cauldron chasing Scabbers, and when Harry follows them, he sees Ron and Hermione arguing about their respective pets. In the film version, Mr. Weasley immediately draws Harry away from the others and tells him the truth about Sirius Black, asking him to promise he won't go after Black, which Harry finds rather odd. Interestingly, in this scene, one of the guests of the Leaky Cauldron reads Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. Chapter 5. Tom woke Harry the next morning with a cup of tea. Ron barges into the room, complaining that Percy is accusing him of dripping tea all over Percy's photo of Penelope Clearwater, his supposed girlfriend. Then Ron states that the sooner they get to Hogwarts away from him, the better. Harry is about to tell Ron about overhearing the conversation between Ron's parents, but he decides not to when Fred and George barge into the room. Congratulating Ron on infuriating Percy again, they go downstairs where they see Mr. Weasley reading the paper, while Mrs. Weasley tells Hermione and Ginny about a love potion she made as a younger girl. Ron asks Harry about what he was going to say, but Harry says he'll tell him later. Harry doesn't get another chance to talk to Ron about it, as leaving is a rather chaotic experience. Ron and Hermione argue about Crookshanks and Scabbers. Hermione assures the caged Crookshanks that he'll be allowed out of his cage once they're on the train. Ron, fearing for Scabbers' life, declares that she won't. Harry is led by Mr. Weasley to a couple of Ministry of Magic cars. They look natural, somewhat classic with a dark green colour, and their drivers dressed in similar colours of emerald. Harry gets in the car first, shortly joined by the usual gang: Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and then, to Ron's disgust, Percy. The trip to King's Cross is uneventful compared to Harry's experience on the night bus. The cars appear to be more or less like normal cars, though it is revealed that the cars seem to find gaps in the traffic that no ordinary vehicle would manage. The family make their way through the platform 9 3/4, with Mr. Weasley leaning against the barrier and casting Harry a certain look. Harry follows suit, and they both step through into the wizarding platform. The family say their goodbyes. At the sight of Penelope, Percy goes pink and begins smoothing his hair before heading over, chest puffed out to show off his head boy badge, something which he clearly values greatly. Harry and Ginny witness this and do their best to control themselves, but are forced to turn away to hide their laughter. They lead their way to the back of the train, where they unload their possessions and their animals. After unloading their items and their familiars, Mrs. Weasley says goodbye to everyone, making sure to give each of the children a kiss. Harry is embarrassed by being included in this, but he also admits to himself that getting an extra hug from her was a good thing. She tells Harry to take care, showing obvious worry for his safety, and then gives each of her children some homemade sandwiches, reassuring Ron that no, they're not corned beef. While she's busy with the children, Mr. Weasley calls Harry over to one side. He warns Harry about Sirius Black, but he explains that he knows, admitting to have overheard them. Then, Mr. Weasley admits that he's disappointed that Harry found out this way. Harry reassures him that this is a good thing, as now Mr. Weasley doesn't have to worry about breaking his promise to Fudge. Harry explains that he's not scared. After all, he can't be worse than Voldemort, leaving Mr. Weasley feeling proud at Harry's bravery, admitting that it's clear that Harry is built of stronger stuff than Fudge seems to think. Then, he warns Harry to not go looking for Sirius Black, though Harry is confused as to why he'd go looking for someone who wanted him dead. Mr. Weasley makes a point of Harry swearing he won't go looking for him, regardless of what he might hear. This suggests that there is something about Black that may encourage Harry to seek him out, despite the man's dangerous nature. After the Weasleys leave, Harry tells Ron and Hermione that they need a word in private. Ginny is told to go away, prompting some hurt feelings. Then they remark on the stranger, a man of young features, yet whose hair is flecked with grey. This is revealed to be Professor Lupin, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, as is pointed out by Hermione. Harry reveals what he overheard during Mr. and Mrs. Weasley's private conversation. Ron agrees with Harry's previous sentiment that you'd be crazy to go looking for Sirius. They hear a noise which turns out to be Ron's sneakerscope. The thing has been damaged since it was last tied to Errol's leg. Ron suggests that they take it to Hogsmeade, the only all-witch settlement in the whole of Britain. Ron remarks that he wants to get in Honeyduke's, a famous sweet shop. Hermione remarks that Hogsmeade was the site of the Goblin Rebellion in 1612, and some place known as the Shrieking Shack is supposed to be the most haunted place in Britain. Harry is deflated to hear all this, revealing that the Dursleys didn't sign his permission forms, and Fudge will not let him out of the grounds, meaning he has to stay. Ron suggests asking Fred and George, as they know every secret passage out of the castle. Later on, Professor Lupin is still asleep. Draco turns up with his cronies Crabbe and Goyle. Draco begins to mock Ron on his father's money troubles. The presence of Lupin is enough to stop Malfoy from causing any real trouble. After a while, the train begins to slow and then stops. Everything is dark, making it hard for Harry to see. Still, some distance from the school, they suggest that maybe the train has broken down. Neville comes in, blundering about as usual. Then, in the darkness, they hear a sound. Professor Lupin, now finally awake, holds up a handful of flames. He warns them to stay where they are. Before anyone can move, the door to the cabin opens. There, they come face to face with a cowled figure so tall it reaches the ceiling. The hand of this thing was grey and wet, like something dead. The creature takes in a deep breath and Harry feels the cabin grow intensely cold. As he begins to pass out, he hears someone screaming. Harry awakes to see that he's on the floor. With lanterns above him, he feels that the Hogwarts Express is moving again. Ron and Hermione help him up and make sure he's okay. Harry asks who screamed, but it appears that it didn't actually happen. Lupin offers him chocolate, telling him it will help. It's explained that the thing was a Dementor of Azkaban. Lupin then heads off to talk to the driver. Alone, Hermione and Ron ask if Harry's okay. They say it looked like Harry was having a fit. Lupin approached the Dementor, wand drawn, and told it to go away, suggesting that these things are not good creatures. Harry explains that the presence of the creature left him feeling like he'd never be happy again. Lupin returns, and after reminding Harry that the chocolate isn't poisoned, Harry eats it and begins to feel better immediately. The rest of the journey is conducted in silence. At the final stop, they meet Hagrid. He leads them to a series of stagecoaches, all of which appear to be driven by invisible horses. That, or they're drawn by nothing. When arriving at the gate, Malfoy comes over, mocking Harry on fainting. Lupin puts an end to it, but it's clear by Draco's observations of the professor's shabby attire that he doesn't think much of the man. They head on into the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall demands to see Harry and Hermione privately. She assures them that there's nothing to be worried about. Alone, Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, enters. Harry is embarrassed at all this fuss. The two staff remark on the presence of Dementors in school, claiming that it is an ill omen. After discussing the potential measures to make him well again, Madame Pomfrey suggests some chocolate. Harry explains that Lupin already gave him some, to which Pomfrey is pleased to have a defense teacher who knows what he's doing. McGonagall asks to speak to Hermione privately about her school schedule. After they've finished, Harry and Hermione head back to the hall where Ron has kept them a seat. Dumbledore is giving a talk to the newcomers. He talks of the Dementors, and Harry remembers Mr. Weasley commented on how Dumbledore did not approve of them being here. He warns the students about where the Dementors will be without the school, offering warnings. Then, Dumbledore introduces two new teachers. Ron remarks on the look Snape gives Lupin. There's clearly some history between the two, a look beyond anger, it was loathing. The next teacher is revealed to be Hagrid, the new Care of Magical Creatures teacher. The applause for Hagrid is impressive, meaning that he is beloved by staff and students alike. Once the introduction is over, the feasting begins. The tables fill with delicacies. Harry, Ron, and Hermione talk about Hagrid's new position, saying that they can't wait to congratulate him. Once everything is finished, they approach the teacher's table where they praise Hagrid. In turn, the newly elected teacher claims that this is in all thanks to them. The scene ends with them heading to the common room where Percy explains that the new password is Fortuna Major. Neville expresses misery at this, not being one for remembering. Harry looks around, feeling that he is finally home. In the movie, the Weasleys have already warned Harry, leading to the intro of this scene being on the train. Mrs. Weasley hands Ron the rat, claiming, "Don't lose him." Harry discusses the events back at the Dursleys. The conversation is similar to the book in that Hermione warns that Harry could have been expelled. Percy and his subplot over Penelope and his role as head boy are removed from these scenes, as are most of the scenes now show Ginny and Harry. The arrival of the Dementor is played more like a horror scene, with the moisture turning to ice and the slow reveal of this wraith-like entity. It's played in daylight, unlike the book, allowing us to get a good look at the creature. In this version, Lupin is forced to remove the Dementor via a spell, whereas in the book, it's more of a dialogue with the potential for conflict. This would suggest something of Dementor intelligence in the book, whereas in the movie, it's played more like a ghost or monster. Ginny isn't present in the aftermath on the train, so we don't get to see how other people react, such as Neville complaining about the cold, and Ginny giving a small sob. In the feast hall, the emphasis on Lupin and Snape's rivalry isn't alluded to. This does remove some of the opinions of teaching staff regarding Dementors. The scene ends with a joke involving the door to the common room, where the portrait is a terrible singer. Chapter 6, Talons and Tea Leaves. When Harry, Hermione, and Ron enter the Great Hall for breakfast the next day, the first thing they find is Draco. His first act is to imitate Harry fainting, a mocking attempt to shame Harry for his experience with the Dementor. Hermione tells Harry to ignore him, trying to stop Harry from engaging. Pansy Parkinson, a fellow Slytherin, then jumps in, mocking Harry with cries that the Dementors are coming. Harry then drops into a seat next to Ron on the Gryffindor table. George hands out the new third year's schedules and then asks about Harry. Ron explains that it's all because of Draco, to which George and Fred remark on how Draco wasn't so brave when the Dementors came to their part of the train. Fred remarks that Draco almost wet himself, but then George admits that he wasn't much braver himself. Harry comments that at least they didn't faint like him, to which George explains that their father had to go to Azkaban, and when he returned, he was pale and shaking. He then explains that Dementors suck the joy out of a place and eventually the prisoners go mad. Fred then breaks the tension with a reminder on how Gryffindor is to face Slytherin in Quidditch, first game of the season. Harry reflects on how the last time they had faced each other in Quidditch, Draco had come off the worst of the two. This brings him some hope. Hermione then examines the new timetable. She seems pleased that they'll be starting some new subjects today. Ron remarks that there must be a mistake as Hermione has 10 subjects a day and there simply isn't enough time. Hermione brushes this off, claiming that she has fixed it all with Professor McGonagall. Ron tries to point out that she has 3 lessons all at the same time, and there is no way she can be in 3 places at once, to which Hermione chides him, claiming that such a thing would be impossible. She attempts to move on, asking him to pass the marmalade, and when Ron refuses to drop the subject, she pushes back, inquiring as to why he cares. After all, she has fixed it with McGonagall. Hagrid then enters the hall. He wears a moleskin overcoat, and in a strange and possibly humorous gesture, he appears to be swinging a dead polecat about. Hagrid approaches the table and then admits that he's been up since 5 getting everything ready. It's clear that he's nervous. After all, this is his first ever lesson. After Hagrid wanders off, Ron wonders what kind of lesson Hagrid has planned. It's clear by his question that Ron is somewhat worried. They finish their breakfast, and then as everyone begins to leave for their first lesson, Ron remarks that they have divination class and it's all the way up on the top floor of North Tower. They say goodbye to Fred and George, and after passing the Slytherin table, Draco mimes another fainting fit to mock Harry. Ignoring Draco, they head up to the top floor, where a panting Ron remarks that there must be an easier way to get up here. Hermione and Ron argue over the correct way to get to the lesson, while Harry stares into a painting of a vast stretch of grass. Slowly, a knight rides into view, demanding to know what these strangers want in his lands. The knight makes a show of demanding a duel, but soon falls over, showing himself to be nothing but comedic relief. Harry asks whether the knight is okay after his fall, to which the knight continues on before, albeit somewhat more embarrassed. Harry takes this moment of exhaustion to inquire further about the North Tower. The knight responds to this by vanishing from sight and claiming that they are on a quest. His demeanor becomes friendly as he tells them to follow him. The 3 follow the sound of his voice and the clink of his armor. Occasionally, they spot him moving from picture to picture along the way through the halls. They follow up a winding staircase till, at last, they hear the sound of their class. The knight bids them farewell and suggests that should they need his aid, they should call upon Sir Cadogan. Once the knight leaves, Ron remarks that they will call upon him should they need someone mental. They reach a landing where they can see the classroom in the distance. Above them is a trapdoor. After Harry inquires to the teacher how they should reach the class, the trapdoor opens, giving them the way in. They climb up the trapdoor and emerge in something between an attic and a tea room. There, they meet Professor Trelawney, the divination teacher. Trelawney suggests that divination is the most difficult of lessons, likely because one needs the sight in order to make use of the art form. Harry and Ron share a look of humor, likely driven by Hermione's fear that maybe her book skills won't be enough to pass. The professor then goes on to explain the nature of the lesson, basic methods, and then developing further over the coming terms. She states that Neville should worry about his grandmother, and one girl should fear a red-haired man, which leads to her being scared of Ron, who is sitting close by. The professor claims that classes in February will be missing due to flu and her losing her voice, an insight into her power and potential, or the ravings of a mad woman, or the signs of someone who likes to play games. The answer for now remains a mystery. She then asks that the class split into pairs, and then they will begin to divine shapes from the tea leaves. Then, after remarking that Neville will break one cup, and then suggesting that he should pick the blue pattern, as she's fond of the pink, Neville then responds by breaking the cup. Harry and Ron pair up. There, after swallowing down some scalding tea, Ron asks Harry to read his future. Harry, not seeming to take the class too seriously, remarks that he sees nothing but a load of soggy brown stuff. He then notes that Ron appears to have a troubled future, filled with suffering, but he'll be happy about it. Not making much sense, Ron quips that perhaps Harry needs his inner eye tested. Ron then attempts to read Harry's future, noting everything from suggestions of working in the Ministry of Magic to something about hippos or sheep. This attracts the attention of the professor. She, in turn, remarks on several ill omens in Harry's future, most of which are rebuffed by Hermione, who appears to find this lesson beneath her, or at least the opinions of her professor. Trelawney then gives the cup a final swirl and then shows visible fear. Apparently, Harry has something called the Grim, an ill omen amongst ill omens. None of the other children show signs of knowing what the omen means. The professor then explains in her dramatic fashion that the Grim is the sign of death. Harry reflects on the sightings of strange dogs, and after showing signs that he is taking it all a bit too seriously, Hermione comes to his rescue, claiming that the image in the cup does not look like the Grim to her. Whether this is true or an attempt to soothe Harry's nerves is unknown. The professor remarks that Hermione has little aura and therefore doesn't know what she's talking about. Though that doesn't stop Seamus from stating that it only looks like the Grim from one angle, and to turn the cup and squint reveals instead a donkey, a far less ominous and more humorous image. Harry, making light of the situation, asks whether everyone is finished figuring out whether he's going to die or not. Professor tells them that this is the end of the lesson, and Harry is left feeling uncomfortable, with even Ron refusing to meet his gaze. They leave the class, heading off to McGonagall's Transfiguration class. Harry chooses to sit at the back of the class, likely out of embarrassment from the last lesson. He thinks about how people keep looking at him like he might die at any moment. At this moment, it's clear that Harry is missing what McGonagall is saying about Animagi, a kind of shape-shifting wizard. He isn't even watching when she transforms into a cat. She wonders out loud what has gotten into the class, likely after a lackluster response to her transformation. In all likelihood, the class is still in shock, worried about Harry's ill omen. In response, Hermione fills her in on their last lesson in divination. The professor then inquires, rather dryly, which of the students is going to die this year, suggesting that this is a regular occurrence. She then remarks that this happens every year, and then makes a comment that she does not speak ill of her colleagues, a harsh comment in itself. She furthers this by stating that divination is an imprecise art form and should not be given too much credence. She ends with a joke that Harry looks well enough to not be excused from any homework, though if he does die, he doesn't have to worry about handing it in. After the lesson, they head to the hall for something to eat. There, Ron appears glum and surly. Hermione attempts to cheer Ron up, reminding him of McGonagall's remarks. Ron's mood isn't lessened, and he inquires as to whether Harry has been seeing any strange dogs lately. Harry replies that he saw a black dog when he left the Dursleys. Hermione suggests this as nothing special, while Ron reminds her of the Grim Omen. Ron remarks that Grims are terrifying and scare wizards, saying that they aren't just an omen, but a cause of death. The situation rises in tension when Ron states that Hermione doesn't have the right aura, as previously stated by Trelawney. She then remarks that if she's bad at divination, then so be it. She prefers her arithmancy class, to which Ron states that it makes no sense. After all, she was with them all morning. Then, after lunch, they head to their magical creatures class with Hagrid. The class was held at Hagrid's hut on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. There, Harry notes the presence of Slytherin students, most notably Draco and his underlings. For a moment, Harry fears that they'll be taken into the forest, and he remembers the previous times there, none of which were overly pleasant. Instead, Hagrid wanders off to bring something out. Hagrid begins with the book, quite literally showing them how to open the book without it attacking you. Hagrid, looking sad at the fact that no one knows how to open one, states that you must stroke the spine, clearly an oversight on his behalf. Malfoy mocks Hagrid on how he should have guessed to stroke it. Hagrid in turn looks to Hermione, somewhat crestfallen, likely doubting himself already. Harry jumps to Hagrid's aid, likely in part due to his already rising anger to the Slytherin. Hagrid wanders off for a moment, leading Malfoy to comment on the lowering standards of the school, especially in hiring someone like Hagrid. Once again, Harry jumps to his defense, telling Draco to shut up. Draco, in turn, mocks him about the Dementors again. Shortly after, Hagrid returns with Buckbeak the Hippogriff, something of a cross between a bird and a horse. Hagrid then goes on to explain that hippogriffs are proud and must be treated with respect. Harry agrees to go first, taking in Hagrid's suggestions of bowing, and if the hippogriff bows back, then it means you can stroke him, and if not, well, it's best to get away quickly. Harry, though clearly afraid, manages to bow to the hippogriff, and then, in an astonishing display, Buckbeak bows back, a sign of respect and friendship. Hagrid, in a moment of joy, suggests that Harry could ride Buckbeak, something which Harry isn't overly sure if it's a good idea. Still, Hagrid is overly confident and helps him up. Harry flies around on the back of Buckbeak and then comes back down, to the cheering applause of everyone but Draco and his cronies. After bowing to Malfoy, he remarks that this whole ordeal was easy, after all. If Harry could do it, then it was obvious. But then, after insulting the beast, Buckbeak attacks Draco. Draco is injured, claiming that he's dying. Hagrid ends the class and takes him away, while the rest of Slytherin comment on how Hagrid should be fired. After the class, the three comment on how Malfoy may have ruined things for Hagrid. They find Hagrid, who suspects he's to be fired soon enough. Hagrid is drunk, and Hermione's attempts to console him are met with reproach, and cries that they shouldn't be out after dark. In the movie, the first difference is the introduction of the Weeping Willow when it squishes a bird. We skip the comments about Hermione's schedule and the trip up the stairs where they meet the knight. The divination lesson is played off similar to the book, though it leans more into the humour and farce. The scene is much shorter, giving no opportunities to show Trelawney as a possible true seer with such things as Neville's cup. Instead, we focus on Harry and his grim omen. The next scene occurs on the way to Hagrid's class. There, we gain some insight into Hermione's strange schedule, where she talks about ancient runes being a more interesting lesson, though Ron remarks that she can't take that lesson as it's the same time as divination. Hagrid's class, though similar, differs in some key ways. For instance, in the movie, he is more confident, playing the stroke the spine comment as more of Draco asking a stupid question, rather than the book version where Hagrid is played off as a more kindly and sensitive man, lacking in confidence. The Buckbeak scene with Draco also plays differently. In the movie, Draco approaches the creature without bowing, showing a disdain for Hagrid's lesson. However, the book has Draco tame Buckbeak with a bow, but it's his comment on it being an ugly brute that makes the bird attack him. This would suggest an understanding of language, making it a sentient animal, whereas in the movie it appears more or less to be of regular animal intelligence. Chapter 7. The Boggart in the Wardrobe. Malfoy doesn't reappear in class until late on Thursday morning, when Slytherin and Gryffindor were halfway through double potions. Harry thinks to himself that Draco carried himself into the hall as if he were a survivor of some kind of war. Pansy inquires as to whether it hurt. Malfoy says that it did, but then winks at Crabbe and Goyle the moment she looks away. Snape informs the class to settle down, which causes Harry and Ron to scowl at each other, sharing a thought that if it were them who had walked in late to the class, they would have received attention. It's stated that Snape favours his own house as leader of Slytherin and thus gives them special privileges. Today, they were making a new shrinking potion. Malfoy states that he can't cut up the roots needed due to his injury, and Snape responds by telling Ron to do it for him. Ron responds by stating there is nothing wrong with Draco's arm, but this only spurns Draco further, telling him to listen to the professor. Ron does as he is told and chops up Draco's roots in a rough and uneven fashion. This doesn't deter Draco, who then tells Snape, which leads to Ron having to trade his carefully chopped roots for the rough chopped. Once finished, Snape then requests that Harry skin Draco's fig, which he demands with a look of spite reserved just for Harry. Draco then inquires as to whether Harry has seen Hagrid lately, which he then goes on to state that he won't be a teacher for much longer. He states that his father has complained to the ministry, stating that his father has great influence. Harry suggests that this is why Draco is putting on this act, to which he replies that it has other benefits too, then demanding that Ron cut up his caterpillars. Neville then begins to panic as his supposed acid green potion turns orange. Snape chides him, demanding to know if anything goes through his head in front of the entire class. Hermione jumps in, asking if she could help Neville, but Snape tells her no, remarking that he didn't ask her to show off. Seamus tells Harry that the Daily Prophet has sighted Sirius Black. He claims that the sighting was close, but Sirius avoided capture as it was a muggle who saw him, giving him time to get away before the ministry could apprehend him. Malfoy inquires malevolently whether Harry intends to capture Sirius single-handedly. He then goes on to say that if it were him, he wouldn't leave it to the Dementors. Harry goes to speak, but at that moment, Snape tells them to leave their potions to stew before they are drunk. And then he adds that afterwards they can test out Neville's, which earns a few laughs from Crabbe and Goyle, all while Neville sweats with nerves. Harry asks Ron if he knows what Draco is on about. Why would he want to hunt down Sirius? Ron states that Draco is making it up to get Harry to do something stupid. At the end of the lesson, Snape heads to Neville, who is cowering by his cauldron. Snape tells everyone to gather around so that they can see what will happen to Neville's toad. He claims that if Neville had followed the instructions, the toad will shrink to the size of a tadpole, and if not, the toad will likely be poisoned. Snape administers a few drops to the toad, causing it to shrink. The Gryffindors applaud and cheer, while Snape looks on with a sour expression. Snape then takes 5 points from Gryffindor, claiming that Hermione helped him despite Snape's request to not do so. Leaving the classroom, Ron asks why Hermione didn't lie about helping Neville, but he turns to see she's already gone. It makes no sense as she was right behind them. A moment later, they see Hermione coming the other way, panting. Ron asks how Hermione did it, to which she wonders what he's talking about. Ron then inquires as to what she's keeping in her large stuffed bag. Hermione states that these are the books from her various lessons. Ron suggests that they don't have any of the lessons in the bag today, and Hermione brushes it off, wondering what they'll have for lunch today. Alone with Harry, Ron suggests that maybe Hermione is hiding something. The next scene states that Lupin wasn't there when they arrived at the dark arts class. He arrives later, looking shabbier, though healthier than when Harry met him on the train. Lupin states that they should put away their books as this is to be a practical lesson. The class follow him out into the hall where they meet Peeves the poltergeist, stuffing the nearest keyhole with chewing gum. Peeves repeats the phrase "Loopy Lupin" over and over. Normally, he is somewhat respectful to staff, and the students look to Lupin and find him smiling. Lupin suggests that Peeves remove the gum from the keyholes, as otherwise Filch won't be able to access the broom closet. Peeves, in reply, blows a raspberry. Lupin then casts a spell, causing the gum to shoot out and head up the nose of Peeves, sending him off. With that, they set off again. They head to a staff room where they find Snape. The teacher remarks that he has no intention of staying, and then warns Lupin not to teach anything too taxing, as Neville isn't capable of much unless Hermione is there to help him out. Lupin responds by stating that he wants Neville to assist him in the operation, and believes he will do a good job. He leads them to a wardrobe on the far end, which in turn gives a sudden bang. Lupin assures them that there's nothing to worry about, and that it is only a boggart inside. He goes on to state that boggarts prefer dark, enclosed spaces, all while the students watch in fear. He inquires as to what a boggart is, and Hermione explains that a boggart is a shapeshifter, something that takes on whatever sight it thinks will frighten us most. Lupin goes on to say that once the door opens, the boggart will assume the form that frightens us most, and then asks Harry if he can see their advantage in knowing this. Harry suggests that with so many students, the boggart won't know which form to choose. Lupin agrees. He goes on to explain that laughter is the best way to defeat a boggart. He then asks Neville what it is he fears most, to which Neville admits it's Snape. Everyone laughs but Lupin, who appears thoughtful. He then inquires as to the clothing Neville's grandmother wears, and then asks him to think of it in his mind's eye. Lupin explains that if Neville is successful, the boggart will choose someone else, so they best come up with their own funny image to counter it. Harry wonders what he is most scared of, starting off with Voldemort, but then begins to think on about the Dementor. Lupin calls everyone off so Neville can have the first interaction. A moment later, the door opens and out comes Snape, reaching for his wand. Neville recites the charm, Ridiculous, and Snape is suddenly wearing grandmother clothes. Everyone cheers and laughs, and Lupin calls on the next student. The lesson continues, changing from one monster to the next, till finally it lands by Harry. Then, before he has a chance, Lupin calls the boggart to him. The boggart takes on a silvery orb shape, to which Lupin remarks lazily, Ridiculous. He awards points to everyone in the class, including Harry and Hermione, who didn't participate but did answer questions. Harry, feeling like he was purposefully stopped from being given a chance, feels let down. Lavender inquires as to why Lupin would be afraid of a crystal ball. In the movie, the potion lesson is absent from the movie. We start right away in the boggart lesson. Snape is missing from the beginning, though Neville's fear remains the same. One difference is that although Neville's fear of Snape remains the same, Lupin makes a joke of Neville's fear, stating that he frightens them all. Azkaban, Chapter 7. Chapter 7, The Boggart in the Wardrobe. Malfoy doesn't reappear in the book, it is said loudly. Ron is second to try in the movie, whereas in the book, he is last. The charm works differently, removing the spider's legs in the book, but giving them roller skates in the movie. Parvati is next, and unlike the book, her creature is a snake rather than the mummy from the book. Harry is after Parvati, which is different from the book as the boggart appears to be bouncing from one student to the next. The removal of the Snape scenes, both in potions and in dark arts, removes the opportunity to paint both teachers as opposites. Snape bullies Neville in both classes and makes favourites of Slytherin, especially Draco. In contrast, Lupin treats Neville with kindness, standing up for him when Snape mocks him in front of the class. Draco's threat of getting Hagrid fired, as well as him getting Harry and Ron to help him in potions, which is absent from the movie. Chapter 8, Flight of the Fat Lady. In no time, dark arts became most people's popular class. Only Draco and his gang had something bad to say about Lupin, commenting on the shabbiness of his robes, stating that he dresses like an old house elf, but no one else cared that Lupin's robes were frayed and patched. After Bogarts, they began to study Redcaps, a nasty little goblin-like creature that lurks wherever there has been bloodshed. Harry remarks to himself that he only wished his other lessons were as enjoyable, worst of all being potions. Snape is in a particularly vindictive mood these days. He did not take news of the boggart turning into himself wearing Neville's grandmother's clothes lightly. He did not find it funny. This results in him bullying Neville more than ever. Harry also reflects on his divination class, trying to ignore the way Trelawney looks at him, with tears in her eyes. Nobody liked care of magical creatures, stating that it appeared that Hagrid had lost his confidence after last time. The Quidditch season was approaching, and Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor team, calls a meeting. With this being Oliver's last year at Hogwarts, he addressed the team with a note of desperation in his voice. He states that this is their last chance, his last chance, to win the Quidditch Cup. He states that Gryffindor hasn't won the Cup in 7 years. Driven by Wood's determinism, the team begins to train 3 evenings a week, despite the rising cold, wet, and mud. Harry returns from practice to find the common buzzing excitedly. Ron explains that they're excited about the first Hogsmeade weekend on Halloween. Harry throws himself down into a chair, the joys of practice draining away. Hermione states that they'll catch Black soon, and then Harry will be able to come. Ron states that Black isn't fool enough to try something in Hogsmeade and suggests that Harry talk to McGonagall, as the next Hogsmeade might not be for ages. Harry agrees to try. During the night, while Harry works on his star chart, Crookshanks leaps on Ron and begins to scratch to get at Scabbers. The rat escapes, with Crookshanks close behind. They catch him. Ron states that there's something odd about Crookshanks, claiming that it isn't an ordinary cat, that it understood him when he stated that Scabbers was in his pocket. Hermione claims that Crookshanks could smell him, that is all. The next morning, Ron is still angry at Hermione. He barely talks to her through herbology, even though all three are working together on a pufferpod. Hermione asks about Scabbers. Ron replies that he's at the bottom of Ron's bed, shaking. In Transfiguration, Harry is determined to talk to McGonagall about the trip to Hogsmeade. He becomes distracted when Lavender begins to cry. It turns out that her rabbit was eaten by a fox. Lavender then states that it's the 16th of October and that Trelawney made a prediction that the thing she was dreading would happen on the 16th of October. Hermione inquires whether Binky, the rabbit, was old. Lavender says that he was young, to which Hermione asks why she was worried he was going to die. She then goes on to state that the rabbit didn't even die on this day, so, technically, Trelawney's prediction didn't come true. Though, Ron steps in, claiming that Hermione doesn't care much for other people's pets. At this moment, the professor enters, stopping Ron and Hermione from saying more. At the end of the lesson, the professor asks the students to hand in their permission slips for Hogsmeade. Harry inquires about whether he'll be allowed without a permission slip, but the professor tells him no, stating that it would be against the rules. Ron tells Harry not to worry, at least there's the Halloween feast. The feast is always good, though Harry reflects it'd be a lot better after a trip to Hogsmeade. Ron suggests using the invisibility cloak, though Hermione reminds him that the Dementors can see through it. Halloween morning, Harry awakes with the rest and goes down for breakfast, feeling depressed. Hermione says they'll bring him sweets from Honeydukes as she looks desperately sorry for him. Ron agrees, and it's clear that both Ron and Hermione have forgotten their squabble. Following the others to the gates where Filch is crossing off names from his clipboard, Draco inquires as to whether Harry isn't going because he's scared of Dementors. Harry ignores him and makes his way back up the common. After refusing to hang out with some of the younger students, Harry leaves again, with the fat lady asking why he bothered to wake her up. Harry wanders around, but soon comes into contact with Filch, who demands to know what he's doing. When it's clear he's not going to Hogsmeade, Filch tells him to go back to his common room. On the way back, Lupin calls out to him. After inquiring about Ron and Hermione, Lupin tells Harry to come in, stating that he's just taken a delivery of a Grindylow for next lesson. This is a water demon. He offers Harry a cup of tea and Harry agrees. He states that he's only got tea bags, but then remarks that Harry is likely to be sick of tea leaves at this point. Harry asks how he knows, to which Lupin replies McGonagall told him. He then asks whether he is worried. Harry thinks of telling him about the dog he'd seen in Magnolia Crescent, but decides not to as Lupin already doubts his ability to take on a boggart. Lupin asks whether something in worrying Harry, to which he lies, saying that there isn't. Harry asks why he wasn't allowed to face the boggart, to which Lupin replies that he feared it would take the shape of Voldemort. Harry states that he was thinking of the Dementors, to which Lupin is impressed, stating that Harry fears fear most of all. A moment later, Snape enters with a potion. He tells Lupin to drink the potion immediately, adding that he's made a whole cauldron's worth. Lupin drinks down the potion, and when Harry inquires why, Lupin states that he's not been feeling well. Harry fears for Lupin's safety, suggesting that Snape would do anything for a chance to teach dark arts. But Lupin shows no sign of understanding his meaning. Later on, Ron and Hermione return with as much sweets as they could carry. Harry asks where they've been, and it's revealed that they've been everywhere. Dervish and Bangers, the Wizarding Equipment Shop, Zonko's Joke Shop, into the Three Broomsticks for Butterbeer, and more. Harry explains the situation with Lupin and Snape. Ron, thinking the same as Harry, is shocked to hear that Lupin drank it. They head down to the feast, where Hermione explains that it'd be strange for Snape to want to kill Lupin in front of Harry. Down at the feast, Hermione and Ron help themselves to double helpings, despite being already full from Hogsmeade. Harry watches Lupin, noting his animated conversation, though he does note that Snape appears to be looking at Lupin more than normal. After they've finished, they head back to the common room where there's a gathering. Ron asks why people haven't gone in yet, and then Percy heads through, stating that he's head boy. Then, in a sudden sharp voice, Percy states that someone should go and get Dumbledore. Dumbledore arrives a moment later. It turns out that the fat lady had left her painting, which was now slashed up. He demands that they send out a search party to find her, but Peeves the Poltergeist states that she doesn't want to be found. After inquiring who attacked the painting, Peeves says that it was Sirius Black. In the movie, the film removes the dark arts lesson on red caps, as well as the rising popularity of Lupin. It also removes Lupin's shabby and patched clothes, as well as Draco's disdain, and comments on his attire. The movie removes the tension between Ron and Hermione who fears for Harry's safety. It also removes the scenes involving Scabbers and Crookshanks, as well as any comment about Crookshanks being more than a normal cat. Instead, we begin with the students at the gate getting ready for a trip to Hogsmeade, and Harry looking on disappointed. We then cut to a scene with Harry and Lupin. Unlike the book, Lupin and Harry's relationship is closer, with the two of them talking in private, with Lupin commenting on how Harry's eyes are like his mother's. There's a closeness and friendliness in the scene that does not exist in the book, with Lupin informing Harry that he was close to his mother, stating that she was there for him at a time when no one else was. Moreover, he goes on to state how Harry's father had a talent for getting into trouble, which is also missing. Book Lupin is more professional and reserved. A scene involving the Fat Lady and the common room plays out the same as the book, though without Peeves, so we have the Fat Lady reveal that it was Sirius Black who slashed up her painting. Chapter 9, Grim Defeat. An atmosphere thick with fear and uncertainty fills the air. After the Gryffindors return from witnessing how Sirius Black has attempted to break in, Professor Dumbledore's immediate response is to gather all the students in the Great Hall, where he informs them that they must remain there for the night, while the professors conduct a thorough search of the castle and its grounds. There's no room for argument. Everyone must stay together for their safety. The other houses, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, soon join them, all equally bewildered and anxious about what is going on. The atmosphere is heavy as the students settle in for an uncomfortable night, with Percy Weasley, proud of his new head boy status, taking charge of organizing the prefects and maintaining order. As Dumbledore leaves to oversee the search, a wave of his wand causes the long tables to fly against the walls, creating space for the sleeping bags that appear in their place. The hall is buzzing with whispers and excitement, and though Percy orders everyone to get into their sleeping bags, most students are too preoccupied with the night's events to sleep. After all, Sirius Black, a notorious criminal, is believed to have breached the castle's defenses. How had he managed to get into the castle, with its numerous protective enchantments and the Dementors patrolling the grounds? Some students speculate wildly. A Ravenclaw suggests that Black might have apparated into the castle, appearing out of thin air. Others offer even more far-fetched ideas, like Black flying in or using disguise charms to sneak past the guards. The conversation is full of nervous speculation, and theories about Black's capabilities grow more outlandish with each passing minute. Hermione Granger, however, dismisses these ideas with her characteristic logic and knowledge. She reminds her friends that it's impossible to apparate within Hogwarts grounds due to the powerful enchantments that protect the castle. Hermione also points out that the Dementors stationed around the school would never let someone like Black slip past them unnoticed. Despite her reassurances, however, the students can't help but feel uneasy. After all, Sirius Black is no ordinary criminal, and his escape from Azkaban had already proven that he was capable of extraordinary things. The tension is so thick that it is becoming difficult for anyone to truly rest. As the night drags on, the hall grows quieter. The dim light from the enchanted ceiling, which mirrors the night sky outside, casts a faint glow over the room. Every hour, a professor returns to check on the students, ensuring that there is no disturbance. Around 3 in the morning, many of the students have finally fallen asleep, lulled by the constant whispers and the starry sky above them. However, Harry Potter remains awake, listening to the soft footsteps of Percy Weasley pacing between the sleeping bags, making sure no one is talking. At this same hour, Dumbledore himself makes an appearance. Harry, lying awake and pretending to sleep, overhears Dumbledore and Percy discussing the search. Dumbledore reassures Percy that the Gryffindors will be able to return to their tower the next day, once a temporary guardian has been assigned to the entrance. The Fat Lady, who guards the portrait hole, had refused to admit Black without the correct password, leading him to attack her in frustration. Though the Fat Lady remains shaken and in hiding, Dumbledore believes she will recover soon. Just as Dumbledore finishes his report, Professor Snape enters the hall. In a low voice, Snape informs Dumbledore that the 3rd floor and dungeons have been searched with no sign of Black. Dumbledore, calm as always, acknowledges the thoroughness of the search but admits that he hadn't expected Black to linger. As the conversation continues, Snape brings up a point of contention, suggesting that Black could not have entered the castle without help from someone inside. This thinly veiled accusation is met with a firm response from Dumbledore, who refuses to believe that anyone within the school would betray them. It's clear, though, that Snape harbors deep doubts. This exchange only heightens the mystery and tension, and Harry can sense that this issue is far from resolved. The next few days at Hogwarts are dominated by rumors and gossip. The students can talk about nothing else but Sirius Black. Theories about how he entered the castle grow wilder and wilder with each retelling. One particularly absurd rumor claims that Black can transform into a flowering shrub, an idea Hannah Abbott from Hufflepuff shares with great seriousness during her biology class. Meanwhile, Gryffindor is adjusting to a new guardian for their common room, Sir Cadogan, a mad, eccentric knight in a painting, notorious for challenging students to duels and constantly changing the passwords. His antics are more annoying than reassuring, and no one is particularly happy with the replacement. As the Gryffindors deal with the chaos surrounding the attempted break-in, Harry finds himself under increased scrutiny from the staff. Teachers seem to appear out of nowhere, trailing him through the hallways. Even Percy has taken on the role of watchdog, which Harry suspects is at his mother's request. However, the final blow is yet to come. Quidditch has always been Harry's escape, a place where he can channel his energy and forget about the dangers that seem to follow him. However, Professor McGonagall, ever the voice of reason, summons Harry to her office for a serious conversation. She informs him that Sirius Black is specifically targeting him, a revelation that doesn't surprise Harry, as he had overheard Mr. Weasley discussing the matter with Mrs. Weasley. Although McGonagall expresses concern for Harry's safety, particularly during Quidditch practices, Harry insists that he must continue playing, especially with the first match of the season fast approaching. McGonagall reluctantly agrees to let him play, but only under the condition that Madam Hooch supervises all of the practices for added protection. As the day of the match draws nearer, Harry and the rest of the Gryffindor Quidditch team prepare themselves for what they expect will be a fierce game against their arch-rivals, Slytherin. However, just days before the match, the team receives unexpected news. Instead of facing Slytherin, they will be playing against Hufflepuff. Captain Oliver Wood is furious, believing that the Slytherins have deliberately faked an injury to their seeker, Draco Malfoy, in order to avoid playing in the treacherous weather. With the switch in opponents, the team must quickly adjust their strategies, as Hufflepuff's style of play is vastly different from Slytherin's. The change leaves the team rattled, and the pressure to perform weighs heavily on all of them. The day of the match arrives in the middle of one of the worst storms Hogwarts has seen in years. Rain lashes down in torrents, and the wind howls across the Quidditch pitch, making it nearly impossible to see or hear. Harry, already soaked to the skin, struggles to keep his broom steady in the fierce wind. His glasses are constantly fogging up, and the rainwater makes it difficult for him to see anything, let alone the tiny golden snitch. The conditions are brutal, and the game quickly becomes a chaotic struggle against not only the opposing team, but also the elements. Hufflepuff's new seeker and captain, Cedric Diggory, presents a formidable challenge. Taller and heavier than Harry, Cedric's size gives him an advantage in the stormy conditions. His weight allows him to better withstand the wind, while Harry struggles to keep control of his broom. As the match progresses, Harry becomes increasingly frustrated by his inability to see through the rain. However, during a brief timeout, Hermione rushes to his aid, casting a charm on his glasses to repel the water. The spell works, and for the first time in the match, Harry can see clearly again. However, the storm continues to rage, and the match becomes even more dangerous. Lightning cracks across the sky, and as Harry scans the stands, something catches his eye. A massive black dog silhouetted against the stormy backdrop, sitting in the highest empty rows of the stadium. It's the same dog Harry had seen in previous encounters, and its appearance shakes him to the core. In the split second that Harry is distracted by the dog, the atmosphere changes. Just as Harry's focus is pulled away, the air around him changes. The wind, though still howling, seems to lose its sound, and an eerie, unnatural silence falls over the pitch. A wave of cold sweeps over Harry, colder than the storm, colder than anything he's ever felt. He knows instantly what is happening. The Dementors have come onto the field. Looking down, Harry sees them. At least 100 Dementors are gliding across the pitch below him, their faces hidden, but their chilling presence unmistakable. The cold seeps into Harry's very bones, and once again he hears the distant screams of his mother, the echoes of her final moments before she was murdered. The memory is too much for Harry to bear. His grip on his broom falters, and before he can do anything to stop it, he begins to fall. The cold overwhelms him, and as the wind whips past, he loses consciousness before he even hits the ground. Thankfully, Dumbledore holds what could have been a fatal blow, stopping Harry from sustaining any major injuries. Harry then comes to in the hospital wing, disoriented and in pain. His teammates, along with Ron and Hermione, surround him, concerned and shaken by the incident. Fred and George Weasley break the grim news. Gryffindor lost the match. Cedric Diggory caught the snitch just after Harry fell, unaware of the chaos with the Dementors. Despite Cedric's attempts to call for a rematch, the victory stands and Gryffindor's perfect Quidditch record has been broken. The defeat hits Harry hard, especially since it's the first time he has failed to catch the snitch. To make matters worse, Harry learns that his beloved broomstick, the Nimbus 2000, was destroyed in the fall. When he had fallen from his broom, it had been blown away by the storm and ended up crashing into the Whomping Willow, one of the most dangerous trees on the school grounds. Hermione gently tips the broken remains of the broom onto Harry's bed, a pile of splintered wood and twigs. The Dementors, the loss, and now his broom, all are grim reminders of the mounting challenges he faces. The book spends significant time detailing the aftermath of Sirius Black's break-in. The chapter includes extensive dialogue, such as Hermione logically debunking wild theories, and Harry overhearing Snape accusing someone inside Hogwarts of helping Black. In contrast, the film condenses these events. The scene in the Great Hall is cut, and instead, the movie quickly moves to the Quidditch match. Harry does not a physical dog that distracts him in the film, unlike in the book. This chapter is also the first to properly introduce Cedric Diggory, which is pretty cool since he will become incredibly important in the next book and film. Chapter 10, The Marauder's Map. Harry is in turmoil. After the disastrous Quidditch match, Harry finds himself not only nursing physical wounds, but emotional ones as well. His treasured Nimbus 2000 broomstick has been completely destroyed by the Whomping Willow. Such a loss has left him in a state of deep sorrow. Though the damage to the Nimbus is irreversible, Harry refuses to let anyone discard its remains, keeping the shattered pieces close by as if they were the last remnant of a dear friend. Madame Pomfrey insists on keeping Harry in the hospital wing to recover over the weekend, and though friends come to visit and cheer him up, including Ron, Hermione, and even Ginny Weasley, who brings him a handmade get-well card, nothing seems to lift Harry's spirits. Beneath his melancholy over the loss of the broomstick, Harry is haunted by something far darker: the Grim. The mysterious black dog-like figure has now appeared twice in his life, and both sightings have been followed by near-death experiences. This eerie connection leaves Harry with a growing sense of dread that his death might be imminent. Harry is troubled by his growing suspicion that the Grim, a death omen in the wizarding world, might be stalking him. Yet, he shares none of these fears with Ron or Hermione, aware that Ron would panic while Hermione, ever the rationalist, would dismiss it as superstition. This secret fear festers within him, creating a sense of isolation from his friends, even as they try to comfort him. Alongside the fear of the Grim, Harry is grappling with another terror: the Dementors. Every encounter with these ghastly prison guards fills him with more than just fear. They bring Harry face to face with the most traumatic moment of his life: the death of his parents. Each time a Dementor comes near him, Harry can hear his mother's screams as she desperately tries to protect him from Voldemort, followed by the cruel laughter of the Dark Lord before he kills her. No one else seems to suffer in this way from the presence of Dementors, and Harry feels a deep shame and frustration that he cannot control his reactions. He worries that his vulnerability makes him weak, though he tells no one. When Harry finally returns to his regular classes on Monday, he is once again thrust into the daily routine of Hogwarts. Although the familiar setting provides a sense of distraction, it also brings new challenges. Draco Malfoy, always eager to exploit any opportunity to mock Harry, taunts him incessantly over his fall during the Quidditch match. Malfoy's relentless impersonations of Harry falling from his broom, as well as his cruel mimicry of Dementors, pushes Ron to his breaking point, resulting in an outburst during potions class. In retaliation, Professor Snape, who never misses an opportunity to show his bias towards Slytherin, deducts 50 points from Gryffindor, further souring Harry's mood. Despite these frustrations, there is a glimmer of hope when Professor Lupin returns to teaching after his recent illness. Harry has always found Lupin's presence to be calming, and his lessons are both engaging and reassuring compared to Snape's harsh demeanor. However, Harry's relief is short-lived, as he cannot keep his questions about the Dementors to himself any longer. In a private conversation after class, Harry asks Lupin why the Dementors seem to affect him more than others. Lupin's response is honest and direct. The Dementors feed on despair and fear, and because Harry has endured more trauma than most, particularly the murder of his parents, he is more vulnerable to their effects. This explanation brings Harry both relief and sadness. On the one hand, he is comforted by Lupin's reassurance that his reactions are not a sign of weakness, but a consequence of his tragic past. On the other hand, it deepens his sense of being different from his peers. He feels set apart by his experiences, marked by a past that no one else can truly understand. Lupin also tells Harry that Dementors are among the foulest creatures in existence, drawn to decay and misery, which explains why they linger around places like Azkaban, the wizarding prison where Sirius Black had been incarcerated. Harry is fascinated by the idea of Azkaban and horrified by what Lupin describes. The prison is isolated on a remote island, but it is not walls or water that keep the prisoners trapped. It is the Dementors themselves. Their presence robs the inmates of all hope, leaving them to rot in their own despair. It is no wonder, Lupin explains, that many of the prisoners go mad within weeks. Harry's thoughts turn to Sirius Black, the infamous criminal who had somehow managed to escape Azkaban, a feat that was thought to be impossible. Lupin shares Harry's bewilderment, remarking that Black must have found some way to resist the Dementors, though no one knows how. This thought weighs heavily on Harry. Not only had Black been able to escape from a place that was supposed to be inescapable, but he had done so while being constantly surrounded by Dementors, creatures capable of sucking the very soul out of a person. The mystery of Black's escape becomes another troubling question in Harry's mind, as he wonders whether the fugitive is truly as mad and dangerous as everyone believes him to be. Though Lupin promises to help Harry learn how to defend himself against Dementors, the lessons must wait until after the holidays. Despite the delay, the promise of learning a way to protect himself from reliving his parents' deaths gives Harry hope. This, combined with the news that Ravenclaw has trounced Hufflepuff in their recent Quidditch match, leaves Harry feeling slightly more optimistic. This means that Gryffindor is not yet out of the running for the Quidditch Cup, and their chances remain alive if they can win their remaining matches. This rekindles Oliver Wood's fervour, and the team soon returns to intense practice sessions in the cold December rain. Harry, riding a slow and jerky school broom, yearns for a new broomstick of his own, though the loss of his Nimbus 2000 still stings. As the Christmas season approaches, Hogwarts is transformed. The castle is adorned with decorations, Professor Flitwick's classroom twinkles with magical fairy lights, and the students buzz with excitement over the upcoming holidays. Many are planning to return home, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione all decide to remain at school. Harry knows that Ron and Hermione are staying to keep him company, though they offer other excuses. Ron claims he can't stand spending time with his older brother Percy, while Hermione insists she needs to use the library. Regardless of their reasons, Harry is grateful for their support. The festive atmosphere at Hogwarts is only slightly dampened for Harry by the knowledge that there will be another Hogsmeade trip just before the holidays, and once again, he will be the only third year unable to attend. While his friends look forward to their Christmas shopping in the village, Harry resigns himself to another day alone, flipping through a borrowed copy of Witch Broomstick and dreaming of the broomstick he can't yet afford. On the day of the Hogsmeade trip, as Ron and Hermione wrap themselves in scarves and cloaks to head out into the snow, Harry makes his way back to Gryffindor Tower. The castle is eerily quiet, with most of the students either in Hogsmeade or scattered elsewhere. As he walks along a deserted corridor, he is unexpectedly hailed by Fred and George Weasley, who are hiding behind a statue. The twins, always up to something mischievous, beckon Harry into an empty classroom and present him with what they describe as an early Christmas present. What they offer Harry is an old, worn piece of parchment. But this is no ordinary parchment. It is the Marauder's map. To Harry's astonishment, the map reveals every inch of the Hogwarts castle, including secret passages, and, most remarkably, the location of every person within its walls, represented by tiny ink dots. Fred and George explain that they no longer need the map, having memorized its secrets, and they entrust it to Harry with instructions on how to use it. The map proves to be more than just a tool for sneaking around the castle. For Harry, it offers the key to something he has longed for, a way to visit Hogsmeade without permission. The map reveals several hidden passages leading out of Hogwarts, and while many of these are known to the caretaker Filch, one leads directly to the cellar of Honeydukes, the sweet shop in Hogsmeade. With this knowledge, Harry realizes that he can slip out of the castle unnoticed and join his friends in the village. Though Harry briefly remembers Mr. Weasley's warning never to trust anything that can think for itself, if you can't see where it keeps its brain, the temptation to visit Hogsmeade is too strong. Convinced that he's not doing anything harmful, Harry decides to take the risk. Using the map, he makes his way to the statue of a one-eyed witch, taps it with his wand, and says the incantation Descendium. To his amazement, the statue's hump opens, revealing a passageway. Harry's journey through the secret tunnel is long and winding, but the thought of reaching Honeydukes sustains him. After what feels like an hour of crawling through the narrow, earthy passage, Harry finally emerges in the cellar of the sweet shop. Carefully avoiding the shopkeeper, Harry sneaks upstairs and slips into the crowded shop, where no one notices his arrival amidst the throng of Hogwarts students. For Harry, being in Hogsmeade is exhilarating. The village is blanketed in snow, the shop windows are filled with festive displays, and the air is filled with the scent of sweets and holiday cheer. Harry reunites with Ron and Hermione, who are shocked and impressed by his unexpected appearance. The three friends explore the village, stopping in shops and marveling at the Christmas decorations. For Harry, this visit to Hogsmeade is not just about enjoying the village, it is about defying the restrictions that have kept him apart from his friends and experiencing a sense of freedom that he has rarely ever known. Their joy, however, is cut short when they enter the Three Broomsticks pub. As they settle in with mugs of warm butterbeer, Harry's heart sinks when he sees Professor McGonagall, Hagrid, and none other than Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, entering the pub. Harry quickly hides under the table, with Ron and Hermione pressing him down to avoid being seen. From his hiding spot, Harry listens as the adults discuss the latest developments in the search for Sirius Black. To Harry's shock and horror, he learns for the first time the full extent of Black's betrayal. Fudge and McGonagall recount how Black, once James Potter's closest friend and Harry's own godfather, had been the Potters' secret keeper under the Fidelius charm. This powerful spell was supposed to keep the Potters' location hidden from Voldemort, but Black had betrayed them, revealing their location to the Dark Lord and leading to their deaths. After Voldemort's attack, Black had then murdered Peter Pettigrew, another close friend, along with a group of innocent muggles. The news leaves Harry reeling. He had always known that Black was responsible for his parents' deaths, but to learn that Black had been his father's best friend and had deliberately betrayed him is a blow that cuts deeper than Harry could have imagined. As Fudge continues to speak, Harry learns that Black had been taken to Azkaban for his crimes, but his escape from the prison remains a mystery. Fudge describes a visit he made to Azkaban before Black's escape, noting how eerily normal Black had seemed, even under the constant watch of Dementors. Unlike other prisoners who were reduced to muttering shells of themselves, Black had remained calm, even asking Fudge for a newspaper so he could do the crossword. This unsettling detail leaves Fudge and the others worried that Black's mental state may be more stable than they had previously believed, making him even more dangerous. The conversation turns to speculation about Black's motives. McGonagall, Fudge, and Hagrid all express concern that Black may be trying to rejoin Voldemort, though they acknowledge that Voldemort is currently powerless and in hiding. Still, the thought of Black reuniting with his former master terrifies them, as it could mean the resurgence of the Dark Lord and a return to the dark times of the First Wizarding War. As the adults leave the pub, Harry emerges from his hiding place, shaken to his core. The knowledge that Sirius Black, the man who had once been his parents' closest friend, had betrayed them and caused their deaths is a revelation that leaves Harry feeling angry, hurt, and confused. His world has been upended by this new information, and he is left grappling with the enormity of Black's betrayal. Though Ron and Hermione try to comfort him, there is little they can say to ease the pain of what Harry has just learned. The truth about Black's role in his parents' deaths adds a new layer of complexity to Harry's understanding of his past, and it fuels a growing desire for justice, or perhaps revenge against the man who had destroyed his family. In the days that follow, Harry's thoughts are consumed by Black. The anger he feels toward the fugitive is intensified by the knowledge that Black is still at large, possibly plotting to kill him. The promise of Lupin's lessons on defending against Dementors is now more important than ever, as Harry becomes increasingly determined to prepare himself for the next encounter with Black, or with the Dementors who seem to follow him wherever he goes. The knowledge of Black's betrayal has left a deep scar on Harry's heart, but it has also strengthened his resolve to uncover the truth about his past, and to confront the dangers that lie ahead. The road to justice and perhaps vengeance is fraught with peril, but Harry knows that he must face it head-on, just as he has faced every other challenge in his young life. The Marauder's map in the Harry Potter books differs from the films, being a single parchment rather than a folded map, and showing people as dots instead of footprints. It reveals true identities even under disguises like Animagus or Polyjuice Potion, but has blind spots such as the Chamber of Secrets and the Room of Requirement. Made using the Homunculus charm, it passed through multiple hands from the Marauders to Filch. Fred and George, Harry and McGonagall uses it in The Cursed Child. Despite its power, it can't distinguish between people with the same name. Chapter 11, The Firebolt. Harry is still grappling with the recent, devastating revelation about his parents' deaths. The knowledge of what he had heard in Hogsmeade continues to hit Harry hard as he returns to the castle, his mind swirling with anger, confusion, and sadness. He is so preoccupied with his thoughts that the journey back to Hogwarts from Honeydukes passes in a blur. The shock of this new information consumes him entirely, and as he makes his way through the castle, all he can think about is why no one ever told him the truth. Ron and Hermione, Harry's closest friends, are aware of what Harry has learned as they overheard the same conversation, but they don't bring it up right away. They can see how troubled Harry is and decide to give him space for the time being. At dinner, they sit with him in silence, nervous and worried, but are unable to speak openly because Percy Weasley is sitting nearby. Once the meal is over, they head to the Gryffindor common room where the twins, Fred and George, have set off dung bombs as an end-of-the-term prank. Taking advantage of the distraction, Harry slips away quietly to the dormitory, needing solitude to process his emotions. In the dormitory, Harry reaches for the leather-bound photo album Hagrid had given him 2 years earlier. The album contains magical photographs of Harry's parents, allowing him to see them as they once were, alive and happy. Harry flips through the pages, looking at the pictures, searching for one in particular. When he finds it, he stops. It's a picture of his parents' wedding day. His father, James Potter, stands with his trademark untidy hair, beaming up at the camera. His mother, Lily, looks radiant with happiness, her arm linked with James. And standing beside them, laughing and smiling, is their best man, none other than Sirius Black. Harry stares at the picture, stunned by the contrast between the joyful, handsome man in the photo and the twisted, dangerous criminal he knows Black to be now. How could this man, so close to his parents, have turned on them? How could he have handed them over to Voldemort? These questions gnaw at Harry, and the more he thinks about it, the more his anger and hatred grow. He wonders if Black had already begun working for Voldemort when this picture was taken. Was he already plotting their deaths even as he stood beside them, laughing and celebrating their wedding? Overwhelmed with emotion, Harry slams the album shut and stuffs it back into his cabinet. The image of Sirius Black smiling with his parents stays with him, replaying in his mind like a nightmare he can't escape. He takes off his glasses, pulls the hangings around his bed, and tries to block out the world. Despite his exhaustion, Harry cannot sleep. He lies awake, his mind racing with visions of Black's betrayal. in his mind's eye, he sees Black blasting Peter Pettigrew, his former friend, into pieces. Harry doesn't know what Black's voice sounds like, but in his imagination, it's full of excitement and triumph as Black betrays the Potters, muttering to Voldemort that he has been made their secret keeper. Voldemort's high-pitched, cruel laughter follows, the same laughter Harry hears whenever Dementors get too close. The memory of his mother's screams, something he hears every time a Dementor approaches, torments Harry. It's the last thing he hears before he finally falls into a troubled sleep, just as dawn breaks. When Harry wakes up later that morning, he finds the dormitory deserted, except for Ron, who is eating a peppermint toad, and Hermione, who is buried in homework. The common room is otherwise empty as it's the first day of the holiday break and most students have already left for home. Harry is still exhausted and his emotions are raw. Ron and Hermione can tell how shaken he is, but they try to tread carefully. Ron, always less subtle than Hermione, immediately points out that Harry looks terrible. Hermione, always more cautious, begins the conversation with a gentle warning. She tells Harry that she knows he must be upset after what they overheard the day before, but she warns him not to do anything rash. She specifically urges him not to go after Sirius Black, reminding him that it's too dangerous and that Black isn't worth risking his life over. Ron, ever blunt, reinforces this, telling Harry that Black isn't worth dying for. Despite their attempts to calm him, Harry's anger proves to be too deep, and their words don't have the soothing effect they intend. Harry listens, but feels they don't truly understand the depth of his pain and anger. He looks at his two friends and, in a rare moment of vulnerability, reveals something he has kept to himself until now. Every time a Dementor gets too close, he hears his mother's screams as she pleads with Voldemort to spare his life. Harry tells them how impossible it is to forget such a sound, and how difficult it is to sit idly by knowing that Black, the man who betrayed her, remains free. It is this revelation that explains why Harry's hatred for Black runs so deep, and why the idea of doing nothing feels unbearable to him. Hermione, visibly horrified by Harry's confession, pleads with him not to act on his emotions. She tries to reassure him that the Dementors will eventually catch Black, and that justice will be served when Black is returned to Azkaban. But Harry, still consumed by the thought of Black's escape, points out that Black is unaffected by Azkaban the way other prisoners are. He isn't broken by the Dementors the way most people would be. Harry's frustration grows as he considers the possibility that Black might never face true punishment for what he has done. When Ron, increasingly nervous, asks Harry if he plans to kill Black, Hermione jumps in, trying to defuse the situation. She insists that Harry doesn't want to kill anyone, but Harry remains silent, unsure of what he truly wants. All he knows is that doing nothing feels intolerable. Sensing the tension, Ron tries to change the subject by suggesting they visit Hagrid. It's been a while since they last saw him, and a visit might help distract Harry from his dark thoughts. Hermione initially protests, reminding them that Harry isn't supposed to leave the castle for safety reasons. But Harry, determined to get some answers from Hagrid, insists they go. He wants to know why Hagrid never told him about Sirius Black, given how much Hagrid knew about his parents. With this, the three friends bundle up in their winter cloaks and make their way through the snow-covered grounds to Hagrid's cabin. The cold is biting and the snow makes their journey slow, but the sight of Hagrid's cabin, looking like an iced cake in the snow, offers some comfort. However, when they knock on the door, there is no answer. The sound of strange moans from inside the cabin alarms them, and they wonder if something has happened to Hagrid. After knocking again, the door creaks open, revealing a distraught Hagrid with red, swollen eyes. Tears are streaming down his face, and he immediately collapses onto Harry, sobbing uncontrollably. It takes both Ron and Hermione to help pull Hagrid off Harry and guide him to a chair inside the cabin. Once Hagrid is seated, they try to comfort him and ask what's wrong. Hagrid, still crying, pushes a letter across the table toward them. The letter is from the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, informing Hagrid that Buckbeak, the hippogriff who had attacked Draco Malfoy during a lesson, is to face a trial. Despite Dumbledore's defense of Hagrid, the committee has sided with Lucius Malfoy, and there is a real possibility that Buckbeak will be executed if the trial doesn't go well. Hagrid is devastated, convinced that the trial will be unfairly biased against him and Buckbeak. He explains that the committee has a reputation for siding with powerful wizards like Lucius Malfoy, and he fears that no matter how much evidence they present, Buckbeak will still be found guilty. The thought of losing Buckbeak is unbearable for Hagrid, who has always had a deep affection for magical creatures, no matter how dangerous they might seem to others. Harry, Ron, and Hermione immediately offer to help. Hermione, ever the academic, suggests that they research past cases involving magical creatures to see if they can find any precedent that might help Buckbeak's defense. They promise Hagrid that they will do everything they can to help him, and their words bring him some comfort, though he remains deeply worried. The visit, though somber, gives Harry a temporary distraction from his anger towards Sirius Black, as he now has something else to focus on, helping Hagrid and saving Buckbeak. As the Christmas holiday continues, the mood at Hogwarts lightens somewhat. On Christmas morning, Harry is woken by Ron, who excitedly points out the pile of presents at the foot of Harry's bed. Among the gifts, Harry finds a large, mysterious package. When he unwraps it, he is stunned to find a firebolt, the fastest, most advanced broomstick on the market. The firebolt is every Quidditch player's dream, and Harry is overwhelmed by the gift's magnificence. He cannot believe someone has given him such an incredible broom, especially since there is no note or card to indicate who the sender is. Ron is equally thrilled, already imagining how jealous Draco Malfoy will be when he sees Harry flying on a firebolt. They speculate about who might have sent it, wondering if it could be Dumbledore or perhaps Professor Lupin. However, Harry dismisses the idea that Dumbledore would send him such an expensive gift, as it would violate school rules. Hermione, however, is less excited and considerably more concerned. She immediately suspects that the firebolt could be a trap, possibly sent by Sirius Black with malicious intent. Hermione's caution frustrates both Harry and Ron, who are eager to believe that the gift is genuine. But Hermione's suspicions only grow, and she eventually decides to report the mysterious gift to Professor McGonagall. To Harry's horror, McGonagall confiscates the firebolt, saying that it needs to be checked for jinxes or curses before Harry can use it. Harry is devastated, and both he and Ron are furious with Hermione for going behind their backs. The confiscation of the firebolt creates a rift between the trio, with Harry and Ron feeling betrayed by Hermione's actions. This chapter has many notable differences from its film adaptation. In the book, Harry receives the firebolt anonymously, while in the film he receives the firebolt at the very end of the movie, as a gift from Sirius Black. Also, the film doesn't use voiceover to verbalize how Harry is feeling about Black's betrayal and Buckbeak's upcoming trial. Also, the tension between Harry, Ron, and Hermione is condensed significantly in the film. Chapter 12, The Patronus. Harry is still feeling a mix of anger and disappointment toward Hermione, who, in an effort to protect him, reports his newly acquired firebolt to Professor McGonagall. Hermione fears that the broom, which Harry receives as an anonymous gift, might be jinxed, possibly sent by Sirius Black to harm him. As a result, McGonagall confiscates the broom to run tests, leaving Harry and Ron infuriated with Hermione, whom they believe has overreacted. The firebolt is more than just a broomstick to Harry. It represents the best broom in the wizarding world, a symbol of freedom and superiority in Quidditch. Having it taken away so soon after receiving it makes Harry feel as though he has been robbed of something special. Ron shares Harry's frustration, viewing Hermione's actions as an unnecessary interference and a breach of trust. From Ron's perspective, Hermione's insistence that the broom be checked for curses is tantamount to wrecking something valuable. Her concerns, while rooted in a genuine desire to protect Harry, are seen by the boys as overly cautious and meddlesome. This creates a rift between the trio, with Hermione isolating herself from the common room, seeking refuge in the library to avoid the tension. Despite the friction between Harry and Hermione, the return of the rest of the students to Hogwarts after the holiday break provides some needed distraction. The once quiet and tense atmosphere of Gryffindor Tower becomes lively again as students flood back into the castle, bringing noise and energy with them. The return of school life helps lift Harry's spirits somewhat, and the focus shifts to more pressing matters, particularly the upcoming Quidditch match against Ravenclaw. Oliver Wood, Gryffindor's Quidditch captain, is particularly eager to ensure that Harry is fully prepared for the match, as Harry's performance is critical to Gryffindor's chances of winning the Quidditch Cup. Wood, determined to improve Gryffindor's standing after their loss to Hufflepuff earlier in the year, discusses the importance of Harry having a top-tier broom. He is concerned about Harry still not having a broom to ride, as his old shooting star would be a serious disadvantage against Ravenclaw's team. Ron informs Wood about the firebolt, leading to an excited reaction from Wood, who understands the significant advantage that a firebolt would give their team. However, Wood is dismayed when Harry explains that the broom has been confiscated for jinx testing. Although Harry reassures him that Professor McGonagall is simply being cautious due to the threat posed by Sirius Black, Wood is undeterred. He promises Harry that he will speak with McGonagall and try to convince her to release the broom as soon as possible, understanding how crucial the firebolt could be for their team's success. As classes resume, Harry is eager to begin his anti-Dementor lessons with Professor Lupin. Harry's encounter with the Dementors during the previous Quidditch match leaves him deeply shaken, and he is determined to learn how to defend himself against them. His fear of losing control again, especially during another important match, fuels his desire to master the Patronus Charm, a spell known to repel Dementors. However, before his lessons with Lupin begin, Harry endures his other classes, including a Care of Magical Creatures lesson with Hagrid. Although the January weather is harsh, Hagrid manages to make the lesson enjoyable by introducing the students to salamanders, fire-dwelling creatures that thrive in heat. The class spends their time gathering wood and leaves to keep the salamanders' bonfire blazing, providing a welcome distraction from the cold. However, not all classes are as enjoyable. In divination, Professor Trelawney continues to make grim predictions about Harry's future. She teaches palmistry and warns Harry that his lifeline is unusually short, reinforcing her earlier predictions of danger and death. While Harry is accustomed to Trelawney's ominous warnings, they still linger in his mind as a reminder of the potential threats he faces, particularly with Sirius Black still at large. Yet, it is Lupin's defense against the dark arts class that Harry is most eager for, knowing that it will lead to his first anti-Dementor lesson. True to his word, Lupin schedules the lesson for Thursday evening. Harry feels both excitement and apprehension as the time approaches, aware that mastering the Patronus Charm is no easy feat. The charm requires immense concentration and the ability to summon a powerful, happy memory to fend off the Dementor's despair-inducing powers. When Thursday evening arrives, Harry makes his way to the History of Magic classroom, where he begins his training. Lupin arrives carrying a large packing case containing a boggart, a magical creature that takes the form of whatever a person fears most. For Harry, this means the boggart will take the form of a Dementor, making it a suitable stand-in for his lessons. Lupin explains that the Patronus Charm is advanced magic well beyond what most young wizards can manage. A Patronus acts as a protective guardian, repelling Dementors by embodying positive emotions that Dementors cannot feed upon. The charm's success hinges on Harry's ability to focus on a single, intensely happy memory while performing the incantation. Harry struggles to think of a memory strong enough, eventually settling on his first time flying on a broomstick, a moment of pure exhilaration and joy. When Harry attempts the charm for the first time, he produces only a thin wisp of silvery vapor, far from the solid Patronus he needs to fend off a Dementor. Still, Lupin encourages him, explaining that even this small result is impressive for a young wizard attempting such an advanced spell. Harry's initial excitement quickly turns to frustration as he realizes how difficult the task ahead will be. Undeterred, he prepares to try again, this time against the boggart Dementor. As the boggart takes the form of a Dementor, Harry feels the familiar coldness and despair wash over him. He struggles to maintain his focus on the happy memory, but the overwhelming presence of the Dementor causes him to lose concentration. Instead of repelling the Dementor, Harry is overcome by the sound of his mother's voice, pleading with Voldemort to spare him. The memory of his parents' death, particularly hearing his mother's final moments, floods Harry's mind, and he collapses under the emotional weight of it. When Harry regains consciousness, Lupin helps him up and offers him a chocolate frog to counter the effects of the Dementor. Although Harry is physically fine, the emotional toll of hearing his mother's voice again leaves him shaken. He explains to Lupin that the memory is stronger this time, and Lupin suggests that Harry try focusing on a different happy memory for his next attempt. Despite the difficulty of the lesson, Harry remains determined to master the charm, knowing that he cannot afford to be vulnerable to the Dementors in the future. In the following lessons, Harry continues to struggle, though his Patronus gradually becomes more substantial. With each attempt, he is able to produce a faint, silvery shape, though it is still not strong enough to fully drive the Dementor away. The emotional strain of the lessons takes its toll on Harry as he is repeatedly confronted with the memory of his parents' death. Hearing his mother's voice, as well as his father's attempts to protect them, leaves Harry feeling both devastated and oddly comforted. These moments are the only times he can hear his parents again, even though they are filled with pain and loss. Harry is conflicted. While he wants to master the charm and fend off the Dementors, part of him clings to the echoes of his parents' voices, as they are the only connection he has left to them. Outside of his lessons with Lupin, Harry's school life becomes increasingly hectic. Wood continues to press him about the firebolt, urging him to push McGonagall for updates. Ron, too, is eager to see the firebolt returned, as he understands how crucial it will be for their upcoming Quidditch match. However, McGonagall is firm in her decision to hold on to the broom until all necessary tests are completed. This leaves Harry feeling frustrated and anxious as he knows that time is running out before the match against Ravenclaw. In addition to the tension surrounding the firebolt, Harry notices that Hermione is becoming more and more overwhelmed with her schoolwork. Despite the rift between them, Harry and Ron cannot help but notice that Hermione seems to be taking on an impossible workload. She is constantly buried in books and charts, and her schedule seems to defy the limits of time, as she appears to be attending multiple classes at once. Although Ron and Harry are curious about how she is managing this, they are too preoccupied with their own concerns to investigate further. Things take a turning point when McGonagall finally returns the firebolt to Harry, much to his and Ron's delight. The broom is deemed safe, and Harry is overjoyed to have it back just in time for the match. However, this moment of triumph is overshadowed by a new conflict. Ron discovers that his pet rat, Scabbers, is missing, and all that remains are traces of blood and a few ginger cat hairs, suggesting that Hermione's cat, Crookshanks, is responsible for Scabbers' disappearance. This reignites the tension between Ron and Hermione, further straining their already fragile friendship. In the film, this chapter differs in regards to the confiscation of the firebolt. In the book, Harry receives the firebolt early on, and it is confiscated by Professor McGonagall for testing after Hermione reports it. This creates tension between Harry, Ron, and Hermione, which is central to the chapter's emotional dynamic. However, in the film, this subplot is taken off entirely, as Harry only receives the firebolt at the end of the movie. The scenes with Harry's lessons with Professor Lupin are also condensed. The film showcases more of Harry's frustration and fear as he struggles to produce a Patronus, yet the book highlights that he feels more scared and emotional, thus being the reason why he struggles to master the charm. The complexities of Harry's relationship with his parents, as well as the prolonged training, are far more developed in the book. Chapter 13, Gryffindor vs. Ravenclaw. The tension continues to build between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The disappearance of Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, continues to drive a deep wedge between him and Hermione, making it seem as though their friendship might be irreparably broken. Ron's anger festers, and his grief over Scabbers' loss fuels an unrelenting bitterness toward Hermione, who remains convinced that Crookshanks had nothing to do with the rat's disappearance. Their once close bond seems shattered, with Harry caught in the middle, unsure how to navigate the situation. Ron, still livid, lashes out at Hermione for not taking the threat to Scabbers seriously, pointing out that Crookshanks has been after his rat for months. Hermione, however, refuses to accept the blame. She insists that Ron has no proof and that Crookshanks is innocent. This impasse between them leaves Harry in an uncomfortable position. Hermione's frustration grows when Harry, trying to be reasonable, sides with Ron, suggesting that the evidence points to Crookshanks. Feeling betrayed, Hermione becomes defensive, accusing Harry of always siding against her, whether it's over Scabbers or her earlier stance against Harry's firebolt. With emotions running high, Hermione distances herself from both of them, throwing herself into her schoolwork and leaving Ron and Harry on their own. Despite the fact that Scabbers was a dull and aging rat, Ron had formed a strong attachment to him. His grief is compounded by the fact that he sees Crookshanks as the culprit and Hermione as complicit. Fred and George, Ron's older brothers, try to lift his spirits by reminding him that Scabbers wasn't exactly a model pet. Fred jokes that the rat's death was probably quick and painless, but Ron doesn't appreciate the humor. He clings to the few fond memories of Scabbers, especially the time the rat bit Goyle, one of Draco Malfoy's cronies. But these memories only deepen Ron's sorrow. In an effort to cheer Ron up, Harry suggests that he join him at Gryffindor's Quidditch practice. Gryffindor is set to face Ravenclaw in an important match, and the practice will give Ron the chance to ride Harry's newly acquired Firebolt, a state-of-the-art racing broom that has been the talk of the school. The promise of flying the Firebolt is enough to distract Ron from his grief, at least temporarily. Together, they head down to the Quidditch pitch, where the Gryffindor team is preparing for their final practice before the big game. The Firebolt is not just any broomstick, it's the fastest and most advanced broom available. Everyone at Hogwarts, from the students to the teachers, is in awe of it. Madam Hooch, the flying instructor who oversees Quidditch practices, inspects the Firebolt before practice begins, marveling at its balance and design. She compares it favorably to older models like the Nimbus series in the Clean Sweeps, emphasizing that the Firebolt's precision and speed are unmatched. Her enthusiasm only heightens the team's excitement, but eventually she hands the broom back to Harry, allowing practice to begin in earnest. When Harry mounts the Firebolt and kicks off the ground, the sensation is beyond anything he's ever experienced. The broom is so responsive that it feels as though it's reading his thoughts, turning and accelerating with the slightest touch. As he flies around the pitch, the wind whipping through his hair, the stadium below becomes a blur of green and grey. The Firebolt's speed and agility are exhilarating, and Harry performs sharp dives and tight loops with ease, impressing his teammates. He feels completely in control, and the power of the broom fills him with confidence. During practice, Harry proves his skill by easily catching the golden snitch multiple times, outpacing even the bludgers that are sent flying in his direction. His mastery of the Firebolt is undeniable, and the rest of the Gryffindor team performs flawlessly, inspired by Harry's incredible display. By the end of practice, even Oliver Wood, the team captain known for his relentless criticism, is completely satisfied. He can't contain his excitement, proclaiming that nothing can stop them from winning the match tomorrow. The team is riding high on confidence, and the Firebolt seems like the key to their success. However, Wood briefly raises a concern at the threat of Dementors. The terrifying creatures had appeared during a previous Quidditch match. Wood, though optimistic about their chances, asks if Harry has mastered the Patronus charm, the only defense against Dementors. Harry, thinking of the feeble Patronus he's been able to produce so far, assures Wood that the Dementors won't show up again. The rest of the team agrees, convinced that Dumbledore, the headmaster, won't allow the Dementors anywhere near the stadium. With that worry pushed aside, the team ends practice on a high note, ready for the challenge ahead. After the practice, Harry hands the Firebolt to Ron, who has been eagerly awaiting his chance to fly it. Ron mounts the broom with a look of pure joy and takes off into the darkening sky. As Harry watches his friend soar through the air, he feels a sense of satisfaction knowing that the Firebolt has brought Ron a brief respite from his troubles. Night falls and the sky turns inky black as Ron flies around the pitch. But the peaceful moment is interrupted when Harry notices something unsettling. While watching Ron fly, Harry spots a pair of gleaming eyes staring at him from the edge of the Quidditch pitch. His heart skips a beat as he immediately thinks of the Grim, the spectral black dog that has haunted him throughout the year, a symbol of death. The sight sends a chill down his spine, but when Ron lights his wand, they discover that the eyes belong to none other than Crookshanks, Hermione's cat. The cat disappears into the shadows before they can do anything, leaving Harry and Ron feeling uneasy. Relieved that it wasn't the Grim, but still unnerved by the encounter, the two boys head back to the castle. They discuss the Firebolt, marveling at its speed and smoothness, but Harry can't shake the feeling of dread that lingers after seeing the glowing eyes in the dark. As they walk through the castle grounds, the shadowy presence of the Grim remains in the back of Harry's mind, though he tries to push it aside. The next morning, the excitement surrounding the Gryffindor-Ravenclaw match reaches its peak. The Firebolt is the center of attention in the Great Hall, drawing stares and whispers from students at every table. Even the Slytherins, who usually revel in mocking Harry, seem awestruck by the magnificent broom. Draco Malfoy, unable to hide his jealousy, sneers at Harry, making snide comments about his luck and the possibility of failure. But Harry is unfazed. The confidence he gained from the practice session on the Firebolt gives him an unshakable belief that Gryffindor will win. As match draws near, Harry feels the familiar mix of nerves and excitement that comes with every Quidditch game. The weather is perfect. Clear skies, a light breeze, ideal conditions for flying. The Gryffindor team walks out onto the field to thunderous applause from their supporters. On the opposite side, the Ravenclaw team stands ready, their seeker, Cho Chang, the only girl on their team, standing out with her short stature and graceful demeanor. Harry can't help but notice that Cho is not only an excellent flyer, but also quite pretty. This momentary distraction sends a flutter through his stomach, though he quickly refocuses on the task at hand. The game begins and Harry kicks off into the air, the firebolt shooting upward with incredible speed. He soars around the stadium, scanning for the golden snitch, while the commentator, Lee Jordan, excitedly describes the action. The firebolt's unmatched agility gives Harry a significant advantage over Cho, who is flying a Comet 260, a far inferior broom. Though Cho is a skilled flyer and tries to keep up with Harry, she can't match the firebolt's speed and precision. She repeatedly cuts across Harry's path, attempting to block him, but he easily outmaneuvers her. As the game progresses, Gryffindor takes an early lead, but Ravenclaw begins to close the gap. Harry stays focused, his eyes constantly searching for the snitch. At one point, he spots the elusive ball near the ground and dives after it, Cho hot on his heels. Just as Harry is about to catch the snitch, a bludger sent by a Ravenclaw beater hurtles toward him, forcing him to swerve at the last second. The snitch vanishes and the crowd groans in disappointment. The match intensifies, with both teams battling fiercely for control. Gryffindor remains in the lead, but the margin is slim. Harry knows that if Cho catches the snitch before him, Ravenclaw will win. Determined not to let that happen, he uses the firebolt's superior acceleration to his advantage, weaving through the players and flying circles around Cho. But Cho is persistent, staying close to him and preventing him from getting a clear shot at the snitch. Then, just as Harry sees the snitch again, something terrifying happens. 3 Dementors glide onto the pitch, their dark, hooded forms sending a wave of cold fear through the air. Harry's heart pounds in his chest, but he doesn't panic. With lightning-fast reflexes, he draws his wand and shouts the incantation for the Patronus charm. To his amazement, a powerful silver figure erupts from the tip of his wand, charging toward the Dementors and driving them away. The Patronus, though brief, is enough to clear Harry's mind, allowing him to refocus on the game. The snitch is still within reach, and with a burst of speed, he races toward it. Cho tries to block him, but the firebolt's agility gives Harry the edge. In a blur of motion, he stretches out his hand and grabs the snitch, securing Gryffindor's victory. The stadium erupts into cheers as the Gryffindor team swarms Harry, celebrating their hard-fought win. Down on the ground, the Gryffindor supporters flood the pitch, lifting Harry onto their shoulders and cheering his name. The victory is especially sweet after the challenges they've faced throughout the year, and the firebolt has proven to be the key to their success. As the celebration continues, Harry catches sight of Professor Lupin, who quietly congratulates him on his impressive Patronus. But Lupin also reveals that the Dementors Harry had fought off weren't real Dementors at all. They were Slytherin students, including Draco Malfoy, disguised in Dementor cloaks in an attempt to sabotage Harry during the game. Professor McGonagall, furious at their actions, gives the Slytherins detention and docks 50 points from their house, further sealing Gryffindor's triumph. Back in the Gryffindor common room, the victory party rages on. Fred and George sneak off to retrieve butterbeer and sweets from Honeydukes, and the celebration lasts well into the night. Everyone is in high spirits, except for Hermione, who sits alone in a corner, deeply engrossed in a massive book. Despite Harry's efforts to get her to join in the festivities, Hermione remains distant, still upset over her falling out with Ron. Ron, for his part, shows no signs of reconciliation, making passive-aggressive comments about Scabbers that only deepen the rift between him and Hermione. The tension between them is palpable, even amid the joyous atmosphere of the party. Finally, the night ends when Professor McGonagall arrives to break up the celebration, insisting that everyone go to bed. Harry and Ron head up to their dormitory, still buzzing from the excitement of the day. But their victory high is cut short when Ron wakes in the middle of the night, screaming that Sirius Black, the infamous escaped prisoner, had been standing over him with a knife. The dormitory erupts into chaos and Ron insists that he wasn't dreaming. Black had been there, right next to him. The news spreads quickly through Gryffindor Tower, sending shockwaves of fear and confusion. Professor McGonagall is called to investigate, and it's soon revealed that Sir Cadogan, the bumbling knight who guards the Gryffindor common room, had let Black in because he had the passwords. The revelation that someone had carelessly left the passwords out in the open shocks everyone, especially when Neville Longbottom is singled out as the guilty party. The conflict between Ron and Hermione over Scabbers' disappearance is downplayed in the movie. Moreover, the firebolt plays a major role throughout the book, particularly in the Quidditch scenes, yet in the movie it is non-existent until the final scene. The Gryffindor vs Ravenclaw match was never shown in the film. Alongside Malfoy and his cronies attempt to sabotage Harry by pretending to be Dementors during the match. Chapter 14, Snape's Grudge. A heavy atmosphere of unease, tension, and mounting fear continues to permeate Gryffindor Tower. Sirius Black has made a second audacious attempt to break into Hogwarts, sending shockwaves throughout the castle. The Gryffindor students stay awake all night in the common room, anxiously awaiting news on whether Black has been caught. As dawn breaks, Professor McGonagall returns, delivering disappointing news. Once again, Black has managed to escape. The sense of vulnerability weighs heavily on the students, particularly Harry, as they realize how close the dangerous fugitive came to harming them. In response to the break-in, the castle's security is significantly tightened. Everywhere Harry goes, he sees signs of the enhanced protections put in place by the staff. Professor Flitwick can be seen teaching the castle's front doors to recognize an image of Sirius Black, ensuring that the fugitive cannot re-enter undetected. Filch, the castle caretaker, is frantically boarding up cracks and even mouse holes, leaving nothing to chance. The fat lady, who was previously attacked by Black, has returned to her post guarding the Gryffindor common room, but she is visibly shaken. To assuage her fears, the school has hired a group of security trolls to patrol the corridor outside her portrait. These trolls, with their menacing appearance and gruff mannerisms, add to the already oppressive atmosphere within the castle. Despite the increased security measures, Harry can't help but notice that the one-eyed witch statue on the third floor, which conceals a secret passage to Honeydukes in Hogsmeade, remains unguarded. Fred and George Weasley had revealed this secret passage to Harry earlier in the school year, and it has provided him with a way to visit Hogsmeade, despite not having a signed permission slip from his guardians. Harry debates whether to tell someone about the unguarded statue, but ultimately decides against it. Ron reassures him that Black is unlikely to use that particular passage, reasoning that they would have heard if Honeydukes had been broken into. Secretly, Harry is relieved, as he doesn't want to lose his only means of sneaking into Hogsmeade. Meanwhile, Ron Weasley unexpectedly finds himself the center of attention following his near encounter with Sirius Black. For the first time in his life, Ron is the subject of admiration and curiosity, and he relishes the newfound attention. He retells the story of that night to anyone who will listen, describing in vivid detail how he woke to find Black standing over his bed with a knife. Ron's tale grows more dramatic with each retelling, as he describes how he stared into Black's wild, skeletal face and screamed, causing the fugitive to flee. While Ron enjoys his moment in the spotlight, he and Harry both puzzle over why Black ran away without harming anyone. After all, Black had no qualms about killing innocents in the past. Harry speculates that Black might have realized he couldn't escape after Ron's scream woke the other students, forcing him to flee before encountering the teachers. On the other hand, Neville Longbottom is suffering the consequences of his mistake. It is revealed that Neville had written down the Gryffindor common room password and accidentally left it lying around, allowing Black to gain entry. Professor McGonagall is furious with Neville and imposes several harsh punishments on him. Not only is Neville banned from future Hogsmeade visits, but he is also assigned detention and forbidden from learning the new password to Gryffindor Tower. This means Neville must wait outside the common room every night until someone lets him in, all while enduring the mocking grins of the security trolls stationed outside. As if that weren't enough, Neville's grandmother sends him a howler, berating him in front of the entire school for bringing shame to the family. Neville's humiliation is complete when the howler arrives at breakfast, and he flees the Great Hall with it, while the Slytherins laugh at his misfortune. Amid the chaos, Harry receives a letter from Hagrid inviting him and Ron to tea that afternoon. Curious about what Hagrid wants to discuss, the two boys head down to his hut at 6 o'clock. They pass the security trolls at a run, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the castle. When they arrive at Hagrid's hut, they are greeted by Buckbeak, the hippogriff, who is lying on Hagrid's bed and devouring a plate of dead ferrets. Hagrid seems preoccupied and worried, and it soon becomes clear why. Buckbeak's trial before the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures is fast approaching. The trial, scheduled for Friday, has Hagrid on edge as he fears the worst for his beloved hippogriff. Hagrid explains that he has already made arrangements to take Buckbeak to London for the trial, booking 2 beds on the night bus. Both Harry and Ron feel a pang of guilt, realizing that they had completely forgotten about their promise to help Hagrid prepare Buckbeak's defense. The excitement surrounding Harry's new firebolt broomstick and the pressures of schoolwork had driven the matter from their minds. Hagrid, however, reassures them that Hermione has been helping him gather materials for Buckbeak's defense. This revelation leads Hagrid to bring up a more personal topic: Hermione herself. Hagrid expresses concern for Hermione, revealing that she has been visiting him regularly since Christmas, often in tears. According to Hagrid, Hermione has been feeling lonely and overwhelmed by the heavy workload she has taken on this year. She is also struggling with the estrangement from her 2 closest friends, Harry and Ron. Hagrid gently scolds Harry and Ron, reminding them that Hermione has always had their best interests at heart, even if they've had disagreements. He points out that the 2 boys seem to value their brooms and pets more than their friendship with Hermione, leaving her feeling isolated. Hagrid's words strike a chord with both Harry and Ron. They exchange guilty glances, knowing that they've been unfair to Hermione. While Ron is still angry with Hermione over the disappearance of his pet rat, Scabbers, he can't deny that Hagrid has a point. Hermione, after all, is still their friend, despite the recent tension between them. After leaving Hagrid's hut, the boys return to the Gryffindor common room, where they find a large group of students gathered around the bulletin board. The excitement in the room is palpable as the students read the latest announcement. Another Hogsmeade weekend has been scheduled for the following Saturday. The prospect of visiting the village lifts the spirits of many students, despite the increased security measures in place. However, Harry is once again reminded that he is not allowed to visit Hogsmeade without a signed permission slip. Undeterred, Harry begins to plot how he might sneak into the village using the secret passage behind the one-eyed witch statue. Hermione, however, overhears Harry and Ron discussing their plan and confronts them. She is furious that Harry would risk sneaking into Hogsmeade again, especially after what happened with Sirius Black. Hermione threatens to tell Professor McGonagall if Harry goes through with his plan, arguing that it's too dangerous. Ron, equally angry, accuses Hermione of trying to get Harry expelled. The argument escalates, with Hermione storming off to the girls' dormitory, clutching her cat, Crookshanks. The boys are left feeling frustrated but undeterred in their plans. On the morning of the Hogsmeade trip, Harry packs his invisibility cloak and the Marauder's map into his bag, determined to sneak into the village undetected. He avoids Hermione's suspicious glances at breakfast and makes his way to the 3rd-floor corridor where the one-eyed witch statue awaits. However, just as he is about to enter the passage, Harry runs into Neville Longbottom. Neville, who has no one to go to Hogsmeade with, suggests they spend time together. Panicking, Harry tries to slip away from Neville, but their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Professor Snape. Snape, ever suspicious of Harry, questions why he and Neville are lurking in the corridor. Harry tries to remain calm, but Snape's piercing gaze and probing questions put him on edge. Snape seems particularly interested in the one-eyed witch statue, and for a moment, Harry fears that his secret will be discovered. However, Snape eventually sends Harry and Neville back to Gryffindor Tower, leaving Harry relieved but rattled. After shaking off Neville, Harry makes his way back to the one-eyed witch and enters the secret passage. He successfully sneaks into Hogsmeade, where he meets up with Ron. The 2 boys spend a pleasant afternoon visiting shops and buying joke products from Zonko's. They laugh and joke, enjoying their rare moment of freedom. However, their day takes a darker turn when they encounter Draco Malfoy, accompanied by Crabbe and Goyle, near the Shrieking Shack. Malfoy, as usual, takes the opportunity to insult Ron, mocking his family's poverty and taunting him about the dilapidated state of the Shrieking Shack. Unable to resist, Harry, still hidden under his invisibility cloak, throws mud at Malfoy, catching him off guard. Malfoy is startled and confused, not understanding where the attack is coming from. When Harry's cloak slips for a moment, Malfoy catches a glimpse of his face. Realizing that Harry is the culprit, Malfoy runs off, determined to report what he's seen to the teachers. Panicking, Harry races back through the secret passage, knowing that Malfoy will likely reach the castle before him. When Harry emerges from the statue, he is confronted by Snape, who has been waiting for him. Snape, clearly suspicious, interrogates Harry and demands to know where he has been. The situation escalates when Snape forces Harry to empty his pockets, revealing both the Zonko's products and the Marauder's map. When Snape tries to activate the map, it insults him with witty remarks from its creators, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. At that moment, Professor Lupin arrives, summoned by Snape to help identify the map. Recognizing the map immediately, Lupin diffuses the situation by claiming it is merely a joke item from a shop like Zonko's. Snape, though unconvinced, reluctantly hands the map over to Lupin. After leaving Snape's office, Lupin reprimands Harry for his reckless behavior, warning him that he cannot continue to take such risks. Lupin's words are particularly harsh, reminding Harry of the sacrifices his parents made to protect him and warning him that sneaking out of the castle is a poor way to honor their memory. As Harry and Ron return to the Gryffindor common room, their mood is somber. They are both weighed down by guilt. Harry for disobeying the rules and putting himself in danger, and Ron for encouraging Harry to sneak into Hogsmeade in the first place. Their concerns about getting into further trouble are overshadowed by the news Hermione delivers. Buckbeak has lost his trial and the Hippogriff is scheduled to be executed. The chapter ends on a bleak note as the trio realizes that their personal conflicts pale in comparison to the tragedy that awaits their friend Hagrid and his beloved Buckbeak. In the book, significant portions of the chapter focuses on the heightened security at Hogwarts following Sirius Black's break-in, Ron's newfound attention after his close encounter with Black, and Neville's punishment for losing the Gryffindor password. These details are largely absent from the film. The film also shifts the emphasis toward Harry's use of the Marauder's map and his secret trip to Hogsmeade, condensing the narrative significantly. In the book, Harry's encounter with Draco Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle near the Shreepishians, instead of Harry getting caught outside and reported. Additionally, the film downplays the emotional weight of Buckbeak's impending execution and Hagrid's plea to Harry and Ron to reconcile with Hermione. Chapter 15, The Quidditch Final. Harry, Ron, and Hermione grapple with the news of Buckbeak's fate. Hagrid sends Hermione a damp letter smeared with tears, revealing that Buckbeak has lost his case and will soon face execution. Despite their efforts, the committee, heavily influenced by Lucius Malfoy, has decided against Buckbeak. Hagrid expresses his sorrow, stating that Buckbeak enjoyed his time in London, but now his execution date will be set. Hermione, overwhelmed by the news, can't hold back her emotions. She's worked tirelessly to prepare a defense for Buckbeak, and now it seems all her efforts were in vain. However, Ron, despite the recent tensions between him and Hermione over Scabbers, steps up and offers his support. He insists that this time Hermione won't have to face the struggle alone. He will help her fight for Buckbeak's appeal. The gesture is significant, marking a reconciliation between Ron and Hermione. Their friendship, which had been strained due to the disappearance of Ron's pet rat Scabbers, begins to heal as Ron acknowledges Hermione's dedication and expresses regret for his earlier behavior. In response, Hermione throws her arms around Ron, crying and apologizing for the conflict they had over Scabbers. Ron, though awkwardly patting her head, shows a softer, more mature side. Their ability to visit Hagrid is severely limited due to the security measures imposed following Sirius Black's latest break-in at Hogwarts. Since students are no longer allowed to wander the grounds after dark, Harry, Ron, and Hermione can only see Hagrid during their Care of Magical Creatures lessons. When they finally manage to speak with him, it is clear that Hagrid is devastated by the verdict. He blames himself for not presenting a strong enough defense at the trial, saying he was too nervous and tongue-tied. dropping his notes and forgetting key information Hermione had helped him prepare. He recounts how Lucius Malfoy's testimony essentially dictated the committee's decision, leaving Hagrid feeling powerless. Despite Ron's attempts to encourage him not to give up hope for the appeal, Hagrid is resigned, believing that the committee is entirely under Malfoy's control. His only goal now is to ensure that Buckbeak's remaining time is as happy as possible. As they head back to the castle after class, the trio encounters Draco Malfoy along with his usual companions, Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy, overhearing Hagrid's distress, mocks him cruelly, making fun of Hagrid's emotional reaction. Harry and Ron, furious at Malfoy's heartlessness, are ready to retaliate, but before they can act, Hermione does something completely unexpected. She slaps Malfoy across the face. The slap is described as powerful, leaving Malfoy staggering in shock. Both Crabbe and Goyle are momentarily stunned, unsure of what to do without Malfoy's direction. Hermione, fueled by anger and frustration, pulls out her wand, but Malfoy, clearly frightened, quickly retreats with his cronies into the dungeons. Ron and Harry, along with Crabbe and Goyle, are left astonished by Hermione's outburst. Ron, in particular, is both impressed and stunned by her fierce reaction. Hermione's emotions are still running high as she demands that Harry must win the upcoming Quidditch final against Slytherin. The rivalry between Gryffindor and Slytherin has reached its peak, and the Quidditch final represents more than just a game. It's a chance for Gryffindor to win the Quidditch Cup for the first time in years, and a personal battle between Harry and Malfoy. Hermione's declaration underscores how deeply invested she is in Gryffindor's success and her growing frustration with Malfoy and the Slytherin team. After the confrontation with Malfoy, Harry, Ron, and Hermione hurry to their charms class. But as they enter, they notice that Hermione has disappeared. This moment is especially strange because Hermione was right next to them when they approached the classroom door. As the lesson begins, Ron and Harry are puzzled by Hermione's sudden absence, especially since she's usually the first to arrive at every class. Throughout the lesson, they can't shake the feeling that something is wrong, and their concern grows when Hermione doesn't show up for lunch either. Ron even wonders if Malfoy could have done something to her in retaliation for the earlier slap, adding to the tension. When they finally return to Gryffindor Tower after lunch, they find Hermione fast asleep at a table, her head resting on an open arithmancy book. Harry gently wakes her, and she immediately panics, realizing she missed charms class. Hermione's frantic reaction reveals just how much pressure she's under with her overwhelming schedule, which includes attending classes that are seemingly impossible to fit into a normal timetable. Ron, noticing her exhaustion, suggests that she's overworking herself and might be cracking up. However, Hermione stubbornly denies this, brushing off their concerns and hurrying to apologize to Professor Flitwick for missing his class. Later, the trio heads to divination, a class Hermione has grown increasingly frustrated with due to Professor Trelawney's constant predictions of Harry's impending doom. This time, Trelawney introduces crystal balls, explaining that they will be tested on their ability to see into the future using the orb. As always, Trelawney's dramatic and vague predictions fail to impress Hermione, who is openly skeptical of divination as a legitimate magical discipline. When Trelawney once again predicts that Harry is being stalked by the Grim, a large black dog symbolizing death, Hermione finally snaps. Her outburst is loud and scathing, calling Trelawney's predictions ridiculous. Trelawney, clearly offended, retaliates by accusing Hermione of lacking the inner eye necessary for divination, and even goes as far as to suggest that Hermione's mind is too mundane for the subject. This pushes Hermione over the edge, leading her to storm out of the classroom, shocking both her classmates and Professor Trelawney. The Easter holidays arrive, but instead of relaxation, the third-year students are inundated with homework, leaving them feeling stressed and exhausted. Neville Longbottom is particularly overwhelmed, on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but even he doesn't have as much work as Hermione. With her divination lessons dropped, she still has a daunting workload from her other subjects. Hermione's struggle with her demanding schedule continues to take a toll on her health, as she's often the last to leave the common room at night and the first to arrive at the library each morning. She is visibly stressed, with dark circles under her eyes, and her usual composure is beginning to crack. Despite this, she remains determined to keep up with her studies. Ron takes on the responsibility of researching Buckbeak's appeal, immersing himself in thick volumes about hippogriffs. His dedication to helping Hagrid is evident, and he becomes so absorbed in his research that he even forgets his usual animosity toward Hermione's cat, Crookshanks. This shows a significant shift in Ron's character, as he moves past his earlier anger over Scabbers and focuses on helping with something much bigger. Meanwhile, Harry's attention is divided between his homework and the intense Quidditch training sessions that Oliver Wood has scheduled daily. The upcoming match against Slytherin is the final game of the season, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Slytherin is leading the tournament by exactly 200 points, which means Gryffindor needs to win by more than that amount to claim the Quidditch Cup. Wood reminds Harry repeatedly that he must only catch the snitch if Gryffindor is more than 50 points ahead, otherwise they will win the match but lose the cup. This puts enormous pressure on Harry, as the outcome of the entire season rests largely on his shoulders. The rivalry between Harry and Malfoy is especially personal this time, with both boys determined to outdo each other, and Harry's desire to win is fueled by his anger over Malfoy's role in Buckbeak's trial. As the match draws closer, the tension between Gryffindor and Slytherin reaches a fever pitch. Small skirmishes break out between students in the hallways, culminating in a particularly nasty incident where a Gryffindor 4th year and a Slytherin 6th year end up in the hospital wing with leaks sprouting out of their ears after a hex. Harry, meanwhile, faces constant harassment from Slytherin students, who seem intent on injuring him before the match. Crabbe and Goyle, Malfoy's henchmen, pop up around every corner, and Harry can't walk down a corridor without someone trying to trip him. Wood, ever the strategist, insists that Harry be accompanied by other Gryffindor students at all times to ensure his safety. The night before the match, the Gryffindor common room is buzzing with anticipation. Even Hermione, normally absorbed in her studies, admits that she can't focus on her homework due to nerves. The atmosphere is electric, with Fred and George Weasley using humour to cope with the pressure, while Oliver Wood remains hyper-focused, muttering strategy to himself as he moves tiny figures across a model of the Quidditch pitch. Harry, however, feels the weight of the match pressing down on him. His stomach is in knots, and despite his friends' reassurances that he will be fine, the thought of the game fills him with anxiety. That night, Harry struggles to sleep. He has a series of nightmares about the match, including one where he oversleeps and the team is forced to use Neville Longbottom as a substitute seeker. In another dream, Malfoy and the Slytherin team are riding dragons instead of broomsticks. Harry wakes in a panic, only to realize that the match hasn't even started yet. He gets up to get a glass of water and looks out the window, where he spots Crookshanks prowling across the lawn outside. To his shock, the large black dog he had seen before, the Grim, appears alongside Crookshanks. Harry is confused and unsettled by this sight, as Crookshanks seems to trust the dog. He wakes Ron to see if he can spot them too, but by the time Ron looks, the dog and Crookshanks have vanished. The next morning, the Gryffindor team enters the Great Hall for breakfast to thunderous applause from their housemates, as well as from the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff tables. The Slytherins, however, greet them with loud hisses, and Harry notices that Malfoy looks paler than usual, likely due to the pressure of the upcoming match. Wood spends the entire meal urging his team to eat for energy, though he doesn't touch his own food. As soon as breakfast is over, Wood leads the team out to the Quidditch pitch to assess the conditions. The weather is perfect, with no wind and a bright, clear sky. As the teams prepare for the match, the tension is palpable. The Gryffindor players are nervous but determined, and as they step onto the field, they are met with a deafening roar of support from the Gryffindor supporters. 3/4 of the stadium is decked out in scarlet, waving Gryffindor flags and banners, while the Slytherin supporters hiss and jeer from their side of the pitch. Madam Hooch blows her whistle and the match begins. From the start, the game is brutal. Slytherin's strategy is clear. They are playing dirty, using brute force and foul tactics to try and overpower Gryffindor. The Slytherin beaters, Bowl and Derek, target Harry relentlessly, sending bludgers his way at every opportunity. Flint, the Slytherin captain, plays aggressively, colliding with Gryffindor chasers and feigning innocence when called out by Madam Hooch. Despite the rough play, Gryffindor takes an early lead, with Angelina Johnson scoring the first goal. The Gryffindor supporters erupt in cheers, but Slytherin quickly retaliates and the game remains close. As the match progresses, the fouls become more blatant. At one point, Montague, a Slytherin chaser, grabs Katie Bell by the head instead of the quaffle, causing her to spin out of control on her broom. Madam Hooch awards Gryffindor a penalty, but the aggressive tactics continue. Harry, meanwhile, is focused on finding the golden snitch, but must be careful not to catch it too early, as Gryffindor needs to be more than 50 points ahead to win the cup. Eventually, Harry spots the snitch near the Gryffindor goalposts. Just as he is about to dive for it, Malfoy notices and pulls a dirty trick. He grabs the tail of Harry's firebolt, slowing him down and preventing him from reaching the snitch. Madam Hooch immediately awards a penalty to Gryffindor, and Alicia Spinette takes the shot, but she misses, still shaken by the Slytherins' underhanded tactics. Despite the Slytherins' best efforts to sabotage the match, Gryffindor manages to pull ahead, with the score reaching 70-10 in Gryffindor's favour. Harry knows that now is the time to catch the snitch. As he searches the field, he finally spots it hovering near the ground. He dives toward it at top speed, with Malfoy hot on his heels. The two seekers race neck and neck, but Harry, flying faster on his firebolt, manages to knock Malfoy's arm aside and snatch the snitch from the air. The stadium erupts in a roar of cheers as Harry raises the snitch triumphantly. Gryffindor has not only won the match, but also the Quidditch Cup for the first time in years. The Gryffindor team is swarmed by their housemates, who lift them onto their shoulders in celebration. Harry is hoisted up along with the Quidditch Cup, overwhelmed with happiness as he sees Hagrid, Professor McGonagall, and his friends cheering for him. This moment is a significant one for Harry, who has faced numerous challenges throughout the school year, but now stands victorious, not just in Quidditch, but in his ongoing rivalry with Malfoy and the Slytherins. The chapter significantly from its film adaptation in both content and tone. In the book, much of the chapter revolves around the lead-up to the Quidditch final, focusing on Harry's mounting pressure and the rivalry between Gryffindor and Slytherin. The Quidditch match itself is detailed, highlighting Slytherin's foul play and Harry's dramatic capture of the snitch, securing Gryffindor's first Quidditch Cup win in years. The film, however, omits the entire Quidditch final, skipping Harry's victory and the significance of Gryffindor's win. Additionally, the book includes Hermione's slap of Draco Malfoy after he insults Hagrid, while she is shown to have punched Malfoy instead in the film. This moment is key in both versions, but is handled differently, with the slap being more spontaneous in the book and the punch being portrayed as more dramatic in the film. Chapter 16, Professor Trelawney's Prediction. It is a week of euphoria for Harry, as the joy of finally winning the Quidditch Cup fills him with a sense of achievement. The weather itself seems to be celebrating alongside Harry and his friends. June brings bright, cloudless days, and the warm sun makes everyone long for the outdoors, where they could laze on the grass with iced pumpkin juice or play casual games. Despite the inviting atmosphere outside, Hogwarts students are instead confined to the castle, preparing for their final exams. The impending exams loom large over their heads, forcing them to focus on their studies, though many would rather be enjoying the early summer sunshine. Even Fred and George Weasley, who are usually up to no good, are spotted studying for their upcoming OWLs, Ordinary Wizarding Levels. Percy, who is preparing for his NEWTs, nastily exhausting wizarding tests, has become even more irritable and strict. As Percy hopes to pursue a career in the Ministry of Magic, he is determined to achieve the highest grades possible, punishing anyone who dares disturb the peace of the common room while he studies. His nerves and strict demeanor are surpassed only by Hermione, who is more anxious than ever as she juggles her impossibly heavy course load. Harry and Ron, who have long given up asking Hermione how she manages to attend multiple classes at once, notice her frenzied study schedule. One morning, they see her exam timetable, and Ron is incredulous as he reads it aloud. Hermione has multiple exams scheduled at the same time, Arithmancy and Transfiguration both at 9 o'clock, followed by Charms and Ancient Runes simultaneously in the afternoon. When Ron carefully points this out to her, she snaps in frustration, insisting that her timetable is correct. Harry and Ron share a look, but know better than to press Hermione, who is so stressed that she barely has time to eat or sleep. Despite their concerns, they have become accustomed to Hermione's secretive ways regarding her use of the time turner, which allows her to attend all her classes. Meanwhile, the trio keeps in regular contact with Hagrid, who remains deeply worried about Buckbeak's upcoming appeal. The Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures has set a date, and Hagrid reveals that Buckbeak has grown depressed from being cooped up for so long. The day of the appeal draws nearer, and Hagrid is torn between hope and dread. Harry, Ron, and Hermione try to reassure him, but their own anxiety grows as well. As the week progresses, the students face a grueling series of exams. Potions is particularly disastrous for Harry, who struggles with his confusing concoction. Professor Snape takes great pleasure in Harry's failure, marking him with what appears to be a 0. The pressure of exams mounts, and Harry finds himself wishing for the simplicity of Quidditch, rather than the complicated spells, potions, and magical creatures he must face in his exams. Astronomy takes place at midnight, with students observing the stars from the tallest tower, while History of Magic offers no relief as the hot, stifling classroom makes it difficult for Harry to focus. By Wednesday, the students are sunburned and exhausted from herbology, and they long for the moment when their exams will be over. Their second-to-last exam, Defense Against the Dark Arts, is the most unusual and exciting test any of them have ever taken. Professor Lupin sets up an outdoor obstacle course filled with magical creatures and traps. Harry, Ron, and Hermione have to navigate through various challenges, such as wading through a pool with a Grindylow, dodging redcaps, and avoiding misleading directions from a Hinkypunk. The final task involves facing a boggart, and Harry excels, receiving full marks from Professor Lupin. Hermione, however, has a terrifying encounter with her boggart, which transforms into Professor McGonagall telling her that she has failed all her exams. The sight of her worst fear leaves Hermione shaken, revealing how much pressure she has put on herself. After the exam, as the trio makes their way back to the castle, they encounter Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, standing outside, gazing across the grounds. Fudge greets Harry warmly, but seems troubled. He explains that he is at Hogwarts on an unpleasant mission. He has been asked to act as a witness to the execution of Buckbeak, the Hippogriff. When Ron boldly questions whether the appeal has already taken place, Fudge explains that the appeal is scheduled for that afternoon. However, he makes it clear that he is not optimistic about Buckbeak's chances. As Fudge speaks, 2 other wizards approach. One is an ancient, frail man, and the other is tall and muscular with a thin black mustache. Harry and his friends quickly realize that these men are representatives of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. The elderly man remarks on how tired he is of his duties, while the younger man, McNair, fingers the blade of a shining axe. Ron is furious at the sight of the executioner's axe and mutters that the trial is unfair, but Hermione quickly pulls him away before he can get into trouble for speaking out against Fudge. The trio heads into the Great Hall for lunch, but they are too worried about Hagrid and Buckbeak to join in the excited chatter of their classmates. While others are looking forward to the end of exams, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are preoccupied with the impending execution. Harry's final exam is Divination, while Hermione's is Muggle Studies. As they part ways, Harry and Ron ascend the spiral staircase to Professor Trelawney's classroom, where the Divination exam is taking place. Neville informs them that Professor Trelawney is seeing each student individually, using crystal balls to test their ability to foresee the future. As Harry waits for his turn, he grows increasingly anxious, both about the exam and about Buckbeak's fate. When he is finally called up, he follows Ron, who later reports that he was unable to see anything in the crystal ball and had to make up his answers. Harry decides to do the same when it is his turn. In the hot, perfumed room, Harry stares into the crystal ball, but all he can see is swirling white mist. He decides to pretend and tells Professor Trelawney that he sees a dark shape resembling a hippogriff. Professor Trelawney is intrigued and speculates that Harry may be seeing the outcome of Buckbeak's trial. She presses him for more details, asking if the hippogriff has its head, or if there is an executioner nearby. Harry, feeling increasingly uncomfortable, insists that the hippogriff is fine and flying away. Just as Harry is about to leave, Professor Trelawney suddenly goes into a trance. Her voice changes, becoming deep and harsh as she makes a startling prophecy. She declares that the Dark Lord's servant, who has been imprisoned for 12 years, will break free that night to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord will rise again, greater and more powerful than before, with the help of his servant. The prophecy leaves Harry stunned, and when Professor Trelawney snaps out of her trance, she seems unaware of what she has just said. Confused and shaken, Harry quickly leaves the classroom. Harry rushes back to the Gryffindor common room where Ron and Hermione are waiting for him. However, before he can tell them about Trelawney's prediction, he notices the somber expressions on their faces. Ron explains that Hagrid has sent them a note with terrible news. Buckbeak has lost the appeal, and the execution will take place at sunset. Hagrid's note is short and shaky, and though it lacks the tears of previous letters, it is clear that he is devastated. The trio is horrified and immediately decides to go down to Hagrid's cabin to support him, even though they know it could get them into trouble. Hermione takes charge and retrieves Harry's invisibility cloak from where he left it in the secret passageway. The three of them sneak out of the castle under the cloak, carefully making their way to Hagrid's cabin. When they arrive, they find Hagrid in a state of shock, though he is not crying. He is pale and trembling, and his hands shake as he offers them tea. Hagrid tells them that Buckbeak is tethered outside, where he can see the trees and breathe fresh air for the last time. Despite his attempts to remain calm, Hagrid is clearly heartbroken, and the sight of his despair is even harder for the trio to bear than his tears. As they sit in Hagrid's cabin, trying to comfort him, Hermione suddenly notices something strange in the milk jug. To their surprise, it is Scabbers, Ron's missing pet rat. Scabbers looks worse than ever, thin, sickly, and desperate to escape. Ron is shocked to see him, but there is little time to dwell on the mystery, as Hagrid looks out the window and sees the execution party approaching. Dumbledore, Fudge, and the executioner, McNair, are coming down from the castle. Hagrid urges Harry, Ron, and Hermione to leave before they are caught. Though they want to stay, Hagrid insists that it is too dangerous for them to be there. Reluctantly, they slip back under the invisibility cloak and leave through the back door. As they make their way up the lawn toward the castle, Scabbers becomes frantic, wriggling and squealing in Ron's pocket. The trio hears voices coming from Hagrid's garden, and they know that the execution is about to take place. Then, the awful sound of an axe falling echoes across the grounds. Hermione, in shock, whispers that Buckbeak has been killed. The chapter ends on this tragic note, leaving the trio in a state of disbelief and grief over the death of the innocent hippogriff. The film significantly differs from this chapter by its omission of the exam sequences, including the defense against the dark arts obstacle course and divination tests, which are central in the book. Additionally, in the book, Harry pretends to see a hippogriff in the crystal ball during his divination exam, while in the film, this moment is skipped entirely, with Trelawney's prophecy happening almost immediately after Harry enters the classroom. Chapter 17, Cat, Rat, and Dog. The air is heavy with tension and disbelief. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, concealed under the invisibility cloak, stand frozen in shock after visiting Hagrid and hearing the distant howling emanating from his hut. They are overwhelmed by a mix of emotions, fear, horror, and a looming sense of dread. The final rays of the setting sun cast a bloody light over the Hogwarts grounds, an eerie prelude to the events that are about to unfold. They struggle to process what has just happened as the reality of Buckbeak's impending execution sinks in. Hermione is especially distraught, choking back tears as she asks how the Ministry could allow such an injustice to happen. Despite Harry's instinct to return and check on Hagrid, both Ron and Hermione stop him, reminding him that they must leave immediately before they are seen. The trio begins the slow journey back to the castle, moving cautiously to keep hidden beneath the invisibility cloak. By now, darkness has descended fully, and the once serene grounds are transformed into a shadowy, foreboding landscape. Tension mounts when Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, suddenly becomes agitated. Scabbers writhes madly in Ron's pocket, his panic palpable. Ron struggles to control the terrified rat, clamping his hand over his chest to keep Scabbers still. The normally sluggish rat is frantic, biting and clawing at Ron as though sensing a nearby danger. "What's the matter with you?" Ron asks in frustration, wincing from the pain of the rat's bite. Scabbers' erratic behavior catches the attention of all three, as they realize that something more sinister may be at play. The situation escalates when they spot a pair of glowing yellow eyes in the darkness. Crookshanks, Hermione's large, orange-furred cat, is stalking them. Harry notices the cat moving stealthily toward them, his wide eyes glinting in the dim light. Crookshanks, with his uncanny ability to track down Scabbers, is fixated on the rat. Hermione desperately tries to shoo Crookshanks away, but the determined cat ignores her pleas. At that moment, Scabbers seizes the opportunity to escape. With a sudden jerk, the rat wriggles free from Ron's grasp and bolts into the darkness, forcing Crookshanks to give chase. Without hesitation, Ron throws off the invisibility cloak and sprints after his pet, shouting at Crookshanks to leave Scabbers alone. Panic ensues as Harry and Hermione are left no choice but to abandon their cover and follow Ron. The trio races across the grounds, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they try to catch up with Ron's rapidly disappearing figure. They can hear Ron's shouts as he attempts to capture Scabbers, the sound of his footsteps pounding against the earth echoing through the darkness. Just when Ron seems to have caught Scabbers, a new threat emerges. A massive, jet-black dog with pale eyes materializes out of the shadows. The dog, which Harry immediately recognizes as the Grim from earlier visions, charges at them with terrifying speed. The dog's enormous frame crashes into Harry, knocking him to the ground with brutal force. Harry is momentarily stunned, feeling as though his ribs have been broken. His wand falls from his hand as the wind is knocked out of him, and before he can react, the dog's hot breath and razor-sharp teeth are inches from his face. Ron, seeing the danger, attempts to intervene, but the dog grabs hold of Ron's arm with its powerful jaws. Despite his best efforts, Ron is dragged away by the enormous beast, his body limp as the dog pulls him across the grounds toward the Whomping Willow. Harry struggles to get to his feet, pain searing through his chest, but before he can reach Ron, something heavy strikes him across the face. Hermione shrieks in pain as she too is hit, the force knocking both of them to the ground. Dazed and disoriented, Harry manages to pull himself up and illuminate the area with a whispered Lumos spell. The light reveals the monstrous Whomping Willow looming before them, its thick branches thrashing violently in the wind. The dog is dragging Ron toward the base of the tree, where a large opening in the roots becomes visible. Ron's face is contorted in pain as he fights desperately to hold on to one of the tree's roots, trying to prevent the dog from pulling him underground. However, the sound of a sickening crack fills the air as Ron's leg breaks under the pressure, and a moment later he disappears into the gap beneath the tree. Harry and Hermione are horrified, watching helplessly as their friend vanishes from sight. Hermione, now bleeding from a gash on her shoulder, suggests they go for help, but Harry refuses. Time is running out, and they cannot afford to waste a single second. They must find a way to get through the Whomping Willow's deadly defenses before it's too late. The Whomping Willow, however, seems determined to keep them at bay. Its branches lash out at them with violent precision, forcing Harry and Hermione to dodge and weave to avoid being struck. The situation appears hopeless until Crookshanks, with surprising agility, darts toward the tree. The cat weaves through the thrashing branches and places his paw on a knot at the base of the tree. Miraculously, the tree's movement ceases and it stands as still as stone. Both Harry and Hermione are astonished. "How did he know?" Hermione whispers, her voice filled with wonder. Harry, still suspicious of the cat, grumbles that Crookshanks must be working with the dog, having seen them together before. With no time to lose, they hurry toward the opening beneath the tree and crawl into the tunnel that lies beyond. The passage is dark and cramped, forcing them to move at a bent-over crouch. The earthy walls of the tunnel press in on them as they follow Crookshanks, whose glowing eyes and bushy tail flicker in and out of view ahead. Harry's mind races as they make their way through the tunnel. He knows the passage leads toward Hogsmeade, but the exact destination remains a mystery. All he can think about is Ron, lying injured and at the mercy of the monstrous dog. The urgency of the situation drives Harry forward, his breath coming in painful gasps as he pushes himself to move faster. After what feels like an eternity, the tunnel begins to slope upward. They emerge into a room, a decrepit, dust-covered chamber filled with broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. The place has an eerie, abandoned quality, as though it has been left untouched for years. Hermione immediately realizes where they are: the Shrieking Shack, rumored to be the most haunted building in Britain. Their discovery of the Shrieking Shack only adds to their mounting fear. Every creak and moan of the old building sets them on edge. The room is deserted, but the sound of movement from above tells them they are not alone. Summoning their courage, Harry and Hermione creep up the crumbling staircase, following the noise to its source. At the top of the stairs, they find Ron lying on the floor, his face pale and his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. He is in agony, clutching his broken leg, but more importantly, he warns them that the dog is not what it seems. It's an animagus. Harry and Hermione have barely any time to process this information before a figure steps out of the shadows, closing the door behind them. The man before them is gaunt and filthy, with matted hair hanging to his elbows and a skeletal face that looks like death itself. It is Sirius Black, the most wanted criminal in the wizarding world. Sirius Black disarms them with Ron's wand, his voice hoarse from years of disuse. Though Harry is still reeling from the shock of Black's presence, something about the situation feels off. Black speaks to Harry as if they have some deep connection, invoking the memory of Harry's father, James Potter. The mention of his father sends Harry into a blind rage, and for the first time in his life, Harry is consumed by the desire to kill. He lunges at Black, fists flying, despite Hermione and Ron's attempts to hold him back. The struggle between Harry and Black is fierce, with Harry fueled by the boiling anger that has built up inside him. He forgets his own physical limitations, forgetting that he is a small 13-year-old boy and that Black is a grown man. All Harry knows is that he wants to hurt Black as much as possible, driven by the belief that this man betrayed his parents to Voldemort. The two tumble to the ground, grappling fiercely, but the fight takes a dark turn when Black's hand closes around Harry's throat. Just when it seems that Black will overpower him, Hermione kicks Black hard, and Ron, despite his injuries, throws himself at Black's wand hand. The chaos allows Harry to retrieve his wand and gain the upper hand. He stands over Black, wand pointed at his heart, ready to exact his revenge. But at that moment, something stops him. A voice in the back of his mind urges him to reconsider. As Harry hesitates, the door bursts open, and Professor Lupin rushes into the room. Lupin disarms Harry once again, but instead of apprehending Black, he approaches him with familiarity. To the shock of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, Lupin embraces Black like an old friend, a gesture that leaves them all speechless. Hermione, in disbelief, accuses Lupin of working with Black and reveals that she has known for some time that Lupin is a werewolf. Lupin does not deny the accusation, but he explains that they are all mistaken about Black. He reveals that Black is not the villain they have been led to believe. In fact, the true villain has been hiding in plain sight all along. Ron's pet rat, Scabbers. Lupin's revelation that Scabbers is actually Peter Pettigrew, an animagus who has been hiding as a rat for years, leaves Harry, Ron, and Hermione stunned. Pettigrew, thought to be dead, is the one who betrayed Harry's parents to Voldemort, framing Black in the process. In the film adaptation, several key elements from Chapter 17 are either altered or omitted. One notable difference is in the book, there is a more detailed and prolonged struggle involving Harry, Ron, Hermione, Sirius, and Crookshanks, where Harry nearly kills Black out of rage before Lupin intervenes. The film condenses this and reduces Crookshanks' role, especially his critical action of stopping the Whomping Willow. Additionally, the build-up to Sirius being an animagus and Ron's revelation about Scabbers or Peter Pettigrew is more drawn out in the book. The intricate details of Lupin's backstory, particularly his connection to the Marauders map and friendship with Sirius, are also given less emphasis in the film. Chapter 18. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Sirius Black and Remus Lupin try to explain to Harry, Ron, and Hermione that Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, is not what he seems. The trio is dumbfounded, finding it impossible to believe what Black and Lupin are claiming, that Scabbers is actually Peter Pettigrew, the wizard everyone thought had been dead for over a decade. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are all skeptical, especially Ron, who has kept Scabbers as his pet for years. Ron is in disbelief that his beloved rat could be the same man who supposedly died 12 years ago in an explosion caused by Sirius Black. Ron protests, clutching Scabbers tightly as the rat struggles to escape his grasp. However, Black and Lupin are persistent. They insist that Pettigrew is alive and hiding in plain sight as an animagus, a wizard who can transform into an animal at will. Lupin takes charge of the explanation, his calm demeanor contrasting with the emotional turmoil of the moment. He reveals that during their time at Hogwarts, he, Sirius, Pettigrew, and Harry's father, James Potter, were inseparable friends. However, Lupin harbored a dangerous secret. He is a werewolf, a condition that isolated him from others due to the fear and stigma surrounding his affliction. Despite this, his 3 friends stood by him, and rather than abandon him, they found a way to help him. Lupin explains how, out of loyalty and a desire to keep him company during his monthly transformations into a werewolf, Sirius, Pettigrew, and James became animagi. This process, which took them 3 years to master, allowed them to transform into animals, which could accompany Lupin safely when he turned into a dangerous werewolf. While in his animal form, a werewolf poses no threat to other animals, only to humans. This remarkable act of friendship allowed Lupin to feel less alone, even during the most painful and isolating moments of his life. Sirius, who is still focused on Scabbers, adds that the 4 of them, known by their nicknames Moony, Lupin, Wormtail, Pettigrew, Padfoot, Sirius, and Prongs, James, used these abilities to roam Hogwarts at night. Under the cover of James's invisibility cloak, they would explore the school grounds and Hogsmeade Village. These nocturnal adventures led them to create the Marauders Map, a magical document that shows the real-time location of every person at Hogwarts. This map played a key role in Lupin's discovery that Pettigrew was still alive, hiding as Ron's pet rat. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are still struggling to process this information. Harry is especially conflicted. He grew up believing that Sirius Black betrayed his parents, leading to their deaths at the hands of Voldemort. Now, Lupin and Black are telling him a completely different version of events, one that shifts the blame to Pettigrew. Black, who spent 12 years in Azkaban for a crime he did not commit, is filled with rage and vengeance. He wants to kill Pettigrew, not only to avenge Harry's parents, but also to clear his own name. Lupin, sensing the urgency of the situation, continues to explain. He tells them that Dumbledore allowed him to attend Hogwarts despite his condition, something that was unprecedented at the time. Special precautions were taken to protect others from Lupin during his transformations. The Shrieking Shack, which the villagers believed was haunted due to the terrifying noises they heard each month, was actually used to house Lupin when he transformed. The Whomping Willow, a dangerous tree planted on the school grounds, guarded the entrance to the tunnel that led from the Hogwarts grounds to the Shrieking Shack, ensuring that no one would stumble upon Lupin in his werewolf form. Lupin's recollections of his school days are tinged with a mix of nostalgia and guilt. He admits that while his friend's transformation into animagi made his condition more bearable, it also led them into dangerous territory. Their monthly escapades were exciting and adventurous, but they also broke several school rules and put themselves at risk. Lupin reflects on how, in their youthful recklessness, they often laughed off the dangers, not fully realizing the potential consequences. As Lupin shares his story, Sirius grows increasingly agitated. He has been waiting for 12 long years to exact his revenge on Pettigrew, who framed him for the deaths of the Potters and the explosion that killed 12 Muggles. He snarls at Lupin to hurry up with the explanation, as he is eager to finish what he started. Despite Lupin's attempts to reason with him, it's clear that Black's patience is wearing thin. Lupin continues, revealing a darker chapter of their shared history with Severus Snape. Snape, who was also a student at Hogwarts during their time, was suspicious of Lupin's monthly disappearances. Driven by his intense dislike for James and Sirius, Snape began investigating. Sirius, in a reckless and dangerous prank, told Snape how to follow Lupin to the Shrieking Shack, hoping to scare him. Snape nearly stumbled upon Lupin during a full moon, which would have resulted in his death had James not intervened at the last moment, pulling Snape back before he could confront Lupin in his werewolf form. Lupin's voice grows heavy with guilt as he admits that this prank almost cost Snape his life. Although Snape was forbidden by Dumbledore to reveal Lupin's secret, he has held a deep grudge against Lupin and Sirius ever since. This animosity is one of the reasons why Snape fought against Lupin's appointment as defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts. Just as Lupin finishes explaining this tense history, Snape himself appears. He has been hiding under an invisibility cloak and is now pointing his wand directly at Lupin. The appearance of Snape escalates the tension even further. He has long harbored a desire for revenge against Sirius and Lupin, and his sudden presence adds another layer of danger. Unlike the film, the book has much more detail on the backstory of the Marauders map, and how James, Sirius, and Peter became animagi to support Lupin during his werewolf transformation. The film also doesn't have Snape use an invisibility cloak when he arrives. Chapter 19, The Servant of Lord Voldemort. Hermione screams in terror and Black jumps to his feet. Harry feels as though an electric shock has jolted him to his core as he watches the unfolding chaos. Snape throws aside the invisibility cloak, his wand trained on Lupin, and smugly declares that he has found proof of Lupin's betrayal. He found the cloak at the base of the Whomping Willow, having followed the group to the Shrieking Shack. His breathless, triumphant tone makes it clear that he believes he has finally exposed Lupin's longtime collusion with Sirius Black. Snape is furious and his eyes gleam with a long-held vendetta. He explains how he followed Lupin, having been suspicious for some time that Lupin was helping Black sneak into Hogwarts. Snape found Lupin's office empty, and upon discovering the Marauders' map, Lupin had left it on his desk. Snape saw enough on the map to track them down. Lupin's failure to take his Wolfsbane potion had provided Snape the perfect opportunity to find him and his suspected accomplice. Lupin tries to explain, knowing that Snape's interpretation is wrong, but Snape is far beyond reasoning. He accuses Lupin of aiding a convicted murderer and using the Shrieking Shack as a hideout. His hatred for Sirius Black, coupled with old grievances from their school days, blinds him to any possibility other than his own. His tone is one of venomous satisfaction. At long last, he believes he has caught Lupin and Black red-handed. Snape is particularly eager to see Black return to Azkaban, where he believes Black belongs. He taunts Lupin, calling him a tame werewolf, and mocks the trust Dumbledore placed in him. Lupin tries to reason with him, urging him to listen to the whole story, but Snape is fueled by his bitterness. He even goes as far as suggesting that both Lupin and Black will be taken to Azkaban that very night. Snape's fanaticism is clear as he relishes the thought of seeing them both punished. At this point, Lupin pleads with Snape to consider the possibility that he's making a mistake, urging him to think about whether a schoolboy grudge is worth condemning an innocent man. Snape is unrelenting. His answer is to cast a spell that sends magical cords wrapping around Lupin's mouth, wrists, and ankles, binding him and causing him to fall to the floor, immobilized and silenced. Seeing this, Sirius Black lets out a roar of fury and charges at Snape, but Snape is quicker, pointing his wand directly between Black's eyes. The hatred between these two men is palpable, their history and animosity boiling over. Snape taunts Black, daring him to give him a reason to strike. Black stops dead in his tracks, unwilling to take the risk. The hatred on their faces is intense, their expressions locked in mutual loathing. Black has no choice but to halt, even though he is seething with anger. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stand frozen in the midst of this confrontation. Harry, still trying to process everything, is unsure of what to do or whom to believe. Ron, clutching the struggling Scabbers tightly, looks just as bewildered as Harry. Scabbers, who has been acting strangely, continues to squirm frantically in Ron's grasp. Hermione, meanwhile, takes a tentative step forward, her voice unsteady and breathless as she tries to appeal to Snape's better judgment. She cautiously suggests that maybe Snape should hear what Lupin and Black have to say. After all, there could be a mistake, but Snape, in his deranged state, is not willing to listen. He spits out a sharp retort, telling Hermione that she, along with Harry and Ron, is already facing serious consequences for being out of bounds and in the company of a known murderer and a werewolf. Snape's voice is dripping with disdain as he commands Hermione to be quiet, warning her that she is already in enough trouble as it is. Hermione, ever the voice of reason, continues to try, pointing out that if there was a mistake, it would be better to know now. But Snape completely loses control, shouting at her to keep quiet and accusing her of speaking about things she doesn't understand. His voice is suddenly loud and unhinged, and sparks shoot out of the end of his wand, which remains fixed on Black. The deranged glint in Snape's eyes shocks even Harry, as Snape bellows at Hermione, calling her a stupid girl. At this, Hermione falls silent, taken aback by Snape's violent outburst. Snape's thirst for vengeance becomes even clearer as he directs his next words to Black. He revels in the thought of being the one to capture Sirius, relishing the idea of handing him over to the Dementors. Snape, lost in his obsession with revenge, gleefully describes how the Dementors will likely give Sirius a little kiss, alluding to the soul-sucking Dementor's kiss. Black, already pale, loses even more color at the mention of the Dementor's kiss. The idea of losing his soul terrifies him, but he struggles to maintain his composure, trying once again to make Snape see reason. Desperate, Black implores Snape to listen, pointing at Scabbers and urging him to look at the rat. But Snape is beyond reason. The mad gleam in his eyes signals that he is not willing to entertain any explanations. Instead, he summons the cords binding Lupin, intending to drag him out along with Black. Snape even suggests that perhaps the Dementors will give Lupin a kiss as well, cruelly lumping him in with Sirius. At this point, Harry feels he can no longer stand by. In an act of defiance, he steps forward and blocks the door, refusing to let Snape take them away without hearing the full story. Snape, already furious, snarls at Harry to move, warning him that he is in enough trouble already. He claims to have saved Harry's life, but Harry, filled with frustration, fires back. He points out that Professor Lupin has had countless opportunities to kill him throughout the year during their private lessons. If Lupin had been helping Black all along, why didn't he kill Harry then? Snape dismisses Harry's logic, refusing to believe that Lupin's intentions could have been anything other than sinister. He sneers at Harry, telling him not to try and understand the mind of a werewolf. Snape orders Harry to step aside, but Harry is enraged. The years of animosity between Snape and Harry boil over as Harry accuses Snape of refusing to listen because of an old schoolboy grudge. The mention of this grudge infuriates Snape even further. Snape, consumed by his hatred for James Potter, screams at Harry, demanding silence. His face is contorted with fury as he hurls insults at Harry, comparing him to his father. In a moment of pure rage, Snape shrieks that Harry should be on his knees, thanking him for saving his life. He goes on to say that Harry, like his father, is arrogant and blind to the truth, accusing Harry of placing blind trust in Black just as James did. Harry, filled with righteous anger, knows he has to act. As Snape moves toward him, Harry makes a split-second decision. He raises his wand and shouts, "Expelliarmus!" At the exact same moment, both Ron and Hermione shout the same spell. The combined force of their disarming charms sends Snape flying backward, his body slamming against the wall before sliding to the floor, unconscious. A small trickle of blood seeps from beneath his hair. The trio stands in shock, realizing what they have done. They've attacked a teacher. Hermione is horrified, whispering that they are in serious trouble now. Her eyes are wide with fear as she stares at Snape's lifeless form. The reality of what they've done begins to sink in, and Harry, though still shaken, is not entirely sure he's done the right thing. Lupin, still bound by the ropes, struggles to free himself. Black moves quickly to untie him, and Lupin rubs his wrists sore from the tight cords. He thanks Harry for his intervention, but Harry, still skeptical, tells Lupin that he hasn't made up his mind about trusting him. Lupin, understanding Harry's hesitation, agrees that it's time to provide some proof. He turns to Ron, demanding that he hand over Scabbers, or as Lupin now calls him, Peter. Ron, clutching Scabbers tightly to his chest, is still in disbelief. He weakly argues that it's ridiculous to think that Sirius broke out of Azkaban just to get his hands on a rat. Ron tries to appeal to reason, saying that even if Pettigrew could turn into a rat, there are millions of rats in the world. How would Sirius even know which one was Pettigrew, especially when he was locked up in Azkaban? Lupin acknowledges the validity of Ron's question and turns to Sirius, asking how he managed to find out where Pettigrew was hiding. Black reaches into his robes and pulls out a crumpled piece of paper, smoothing it out and showing it to the others. It's the photograph of Ron and his family that appeared in the Daily Prophet the previous summer. There, perched on Ron's shoulder, is Scabbers. Lupin is stunned, asking Black how he came by the photograph. Black explains that Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, visited him in Azkaban during an inspection and had given him his copy of the Daily Prophet. When Black saw the photograph, he recognized Pettigrew immediately. The caption beneath the photograph stated that Ron would be returning to Hogwarts, where Harry was. Black knew this was his chance. Lupin, his voice now quiet with realization, remarks that Scabbers has a toe missing. Black confirms that Pettigrew cut it off himself just before he transformed into a rat, faking his own death. He recounts how, when he had cornered Pettigrew on that fateful day, Pettigrew had loudly accused him of betraying the Potters for all to hear. Then, before Black could curse him, Pettigrew blew apart the street, killing the nearby muggles and vanishing into the sewers with the other rats. Lupin continues to explain, pointing out that the largest piece of Pettigrew that the Ministry found was a finger. Ron, still trying to hold on to his disbelief, argues that Scabbers could have lost his toe in a fight with another rat. But Lupin counters by asking why Scabbers has lived so long. Most rats don't live for more than a few years, but Scabbers has been with Ron's family for 12 years, which is highly unusual. Ron tries to argue that they've been taking good care of him, but even Harry begins to realize that something is off. He remembers that Scabbers has been looking ill ever since Ron returned from Egypt, long before they had met Crookshanks. Lupin points out that Scabbers has likely been losing weight out of fear ever since Sirius escaped from Azkaban. Black confirms this, explaining that Crookshanks, far from being a mad cat, is actually highly intelligent. He recognized Pettigrew for what he was from the start. Black reveals that Crookshanks has been helping him all along. The cat had stolen passwords from Gryffindor Tower to aid Black in his attempt to catch Pettigrew. Crookshanks, understanding Black's true nature as an animagus, had even tried to bring Pettigrew to Black on multiple occasions, but had failed. Crookshanks had left blood on Ron's sheets after Pettigrew bit himself, faking his own death yet again. Harry listens to all of this, struggling to make sense of it. The story seems absurd, and yet the pieces start to fit together. He recalls how Scabbers' behavior had changed ever since Sirius's escape, long before Crookshanks came into the picture. Slowly, Harry begins to accept the truth. Black, his voice hoarse, reveals his final plan: to kill Pettigrew. Harry, still grappling with his emotions, bursts out in fury, accusing Black of coming to finish Pettigrew off just as he had killed his parents. Lupin tries to calm Harry down, explaining that it was Peter, not Sirius, who had betrayed his parents. But Harry is inconsolable. He had believed for so long that Black was responsible for the deaths of his parents, and he refuses to accept that everything he thought he knew was wrong. Black, looking haunted, admits that he feels responsible for the deaths of James and Lily. He had convinced them to switch to Peter as their secret keeper, thinking it would be the perfect bluff to keep them safe. But he had been wrong. He had never imagined that Peter would betray them. Black's voice cracks as he recounts the night he arrived at the Potter's house, only to find it destroyed and his friends dead. He had known immediately that Peter was responsible. Lupin steps in, his voice firm, and tells Harry that there is one way to prove everything. He asks Ron to hand over Scabbers. Ron, still clinging to the rat, hesitates, but eventually he gives in. Scabbers, sensing danger, squeals and writhes in Lupin's grip, his tiny eyes bulging with terror. Lupin and Black prepare to cast a spell to force Pettigrew to reveal his true form. On the count of 3, they cast a simultaneous spell. A bright flash of blue-white light fills the room, and Scabbers is frozen in midair, twisting madly. Ron cries out as the rat falls to the floor. There is another blinding flash, and in the place where Scabbers had been, a man appears. Peter Pettigrew, once believed to be dead, now stands before them. He is a small, cringing man with thin, colorless hair and a bald patch on top of his head. His skin is grubby, and there is something distinctly rat-like about his appearance, from his pointed nose to his small, watery eyes. He looks around the room, clearly panicked, and his eyes dart nervously to the door, as though he is searching for an escape. Lupin greets him with a cold familiarity, addressing him as Peter and commenting on how long it has been since they last saw each other. Pettigrew, in a high-pitched, squeaky voice, tries to plead for his life, calling Lupin and Sirius his old friends. He denies any wrongdoing, trying to convince them that Sirius had always been the true traitor. Black, filled with disgust, moves to attack Pettigrew, but Lupin stops him. They need answers, and Lupin calmly begins to question Pettigrew. Pettigrew, trembling and sweating profusely, tries to worm his way out of the situation, repeatedly pointing to Black and accusing him of trying to kill him. His voice is shrill as he insists that Black had killed James and Lily and is now back to finish him off. Lupin isn't fooled by Pettigrew's act. He coldly points out that Pettigrew's story doesn't add up. Why? He asks, would an innocent man choose to live for 12 years as a rat? Pettigrew, growing more desperate, claims that he had no choice. He was terrified of Voldemort's supporters who would have come after him if they had known he was still alive. Pettigrew tries to paint himself as a victim, insisting that he had only been trying to survive. Black, his face contorted with rage, calls Pettigrew a coward and a traitor. He accuses him of selling James and Lily to Voldemort in exchange for his own life. Pettigrew, now sobbing, begs for mercy, saying that Voldemort had powers they couldn't imagine. He claims that he was too scared to resist Voldemort and that he never meant for James and Lily to die. The confrontation between the three former friends, Black, Lupin, and Pettigrew, reaches a boiling point as Pettigrew's lies unravel. Pettigrew pleads with Ron, Hermione, and even Harry to save him, trying to appeal to their sense of mercy. But they all see through his act. Harry, especially, is filled with anger and revulsion at the man who betrayed his parents and allowed Sirius to be wrongfully imprisoned for so long. When Black and Lupin prepare to kill Pettigrew, Harry steps in and stops them. He argues that they shouldn't kill Pettigrew, even though he deserves it. Harry, thinking of his father, believes that James wouldn't have wanted them to become killers for the sake of revenge. Instead, Harry insists that they take Pettigrew back to the castle and hand him over to the Dementors. Pettigrew, shaking with fear, clutches at Harry, thanking him profusely. But Harry, filled with disgust, tells Pettigrew that he is not doing it for him. He's doing it because it's the right thing to do. With Pettigrew bound and gagged and Snape still unconscious, the group prepares to leave the Shrieking Shack. Black and Lupin express their gratitude to Harry, understanding the difficult decision he made. They chain Pettigrew to Ron and Lupin to ensure that he cannot escape, and Black conjures heavy manacles to secure him further. Crookshanks leads the way out, his bottle-brush tail held high as the group makes their way back to the castle, carrying the weight of the shocking truths they've just uncovered. This chapter goes into much more detail about the backstory of Peter Pettigrew's betrayal and the dynamics between Lupin, Black, and Snape. The film doesn't have Sirius Black recognize Pettigrew in the Daily Prophet photo and the detailed retelling of Pettigrew faking his own death. The book also emphasizes Snape's personal vendetta against Lupin and Black, which is only briefly touched upon in the film. Additionally, the movie simplifies Pettigrew's transformation scene, and Hermione's role in attempting to reason with Snape is downplayed. Furthermore, the physical altercation between Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Snape is more intense in the book. Chapter 20, The Dementor's Kiss. The tension continues to escalate as Harry, Hermione, and a peculiar group make their way back from the Shrieking Shack. Crookshanks, the intelligent cat, leads the way, followed by Professor Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, whom they've captured, and Ron, who is bound to Pettigrew due to his broken leg. Professor Snape, who had previously been knocked unconscious, is magically levitated by Sirius Black, who uses his wand to make Snape's body float awkwardly ahead. Harry and Hermione trail at the rear of the group. As they traverse the dark and narrow tunnel that leads from the Shrieking Shack back to Hogwarts, Sirius Black shares an important revelation with Harry. He is Harry's godfather, and Harry's parents had appointed him as Harry's guardian in the event of their deaths. Black hesitantly offers Harry the chance to live with him once his name is cleared. Harry is ecstatic, immediately agreeing to leave the Dursleys. This brief moment of hope and excitement is a rare emotional high for both Harry and Sirius, who smiles genuinely at the prospect of building a new life together. Once they reach the Whomping Willow, Crookshanks deactivates the violent tree by pressing the knot that halts its thrashing branches, allowing the group to exit. As they move toward the castle, the full moon emerges, casting a pale light over the scene. Unfortunately, this triggers a catastrophic transformation in Lupin, who, as a werewolf, had not taken his wolfsbane potion, which normally helps him retain his human mind. Realizing the imminent danger, Sirius shouts at Harry and Hermione to run, but Harry refuses to leave Ron. Lupin begins to painfully transform into a werewolf. His body stretches, fur sprouts, and his face elongates into a wolfish snout. Sensing the danger, Sirius transforms into his animagus form, a large black dog, and leaps into action. He tackles Lupin, who has now fully turned into a werewolf, preventing him from attacking Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The two creatures engage in a fierce, brutal fight. biting and clawing at each other in a desperate struggle. In the chaos, Pettigrew seizes the opportunity to escape. He grabs Lupin's fallen wand and uses it to stun Ron, leaving him unconscious. Crookshanks attempts to stop him, but is also knocked aside by Pettigrew's magic. Harry tries to disarm Pettigrew, but it's too late. Pettigrew transforms back into his animagus form, a rat, and slips out of the magical restraints that had bound him. Before Harry can stop him, Pettigrew scurries off into the night, disappearing into the underbrush, leaving Harry, Hermione, and an unconscious Ron behind. Lupin, now free of Sirius's grasp, bolts into the Forbidden Forest in his werewolf form, while Sirius, despite being injured in the fight, pursues Pettigrew. Harry and Hermione rush to check on Ron, who is still alive but badly shaken and unresponsive. With no other options left, Harry decides they must take Ron and the still unconscious Snape back to the castle to get help. However, before they can act, Harry hears a pained yelp coming from the direction of the lake. Realizing Sirius is in trouble, Harry sprints toward the sound, with Hermione following close behind. When they reach the lake, they find Sirius in human form, collapsed on the ground, surrounded by Dementors. The dark creatures close in on him, preparing to perform the Dementor's kiss, the soul-sucking fate worse than death. Harry and Hermione are soon surrounded by dozens of Dementors themselves, who begin to sap their strength and happiness. Desperate to save Sirius and themselves, Harry tries to cast a Patronus, a powerful spell that repels Dementors. He clings to the happy thought of leaving the Dursleys and living with Sirius, but his Patronus is weak, a mere wisp of silver mist that barely holds the Dementors at bay. Hermione, too, attempts to cast a Patronus, but she is too overwhelmed by the terror and despair the Dementors induce. As the Dementors press closer, their foul, rattling breath chilling the air, Harry begins to hear the haunting screams of his mother in his head, a result of the traumatic memories triggered by the Dementor's presence. The closest Dementor pulls back its hood, revealing a grotesque, decayed face with a gaping hole where its mouth should be. It leans over Harry, preparing to deliver the Dementor's kiss. Just as all hope seems lost, a bright, silvery light explodes across the scene, driving the Dementors back. A mysterious Patronus in the form of a magnificent, galloping animal charges across the lake, scattering the Dementors in all directions. Harry, barely conscious and unable to identify the source of the Patronus, collapses onto the ground, his strength completely spent. In his final moments of consciousness, Harry sees a figure on the opposite shore of the lake, who appears to be beckoning to the glowing animal. Though the figure seems oddly familiar, Harry is too weak and disoriented to make sense of what he's seeing. So, the film shortens the conversation between Sirius Black and Harry, where Sirius offers Harry a chance to live with him after his name is cleared. Another difference is the depiction of Lupin's transformation into a werewolf. While the book details his painful change and the subsequent struggle between Lupin and Sirius, the film rushes this transformation. Chapter 21, Hermione's Secret. Harry is lying in the hospital wing, barely conscious after the intense events that unfolded earlier. He feels disoriented, heavy-limbed, and mentally sluggish, as though a fog is clouding his thoughts. As he drifts in and out of awareness, he overhears a conversation taking place in the corridor outside. His ears pick up the familiar voices of Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, and Professor Snape. The conversation quickly captures Harry's attention, and a sense of dread begins to seep in as the two men discuss the events of the night. Snape, never missing an opportunity to undermine Harry, Ron, and Hermione, is weaving his own version of what transpired. He explains to Fudge that the trio had been bewitched by Sirius Black, influenced by a Confundus charm, and, as a result, were acting irrationally. Snape accuses them of being tricked into believing that Sirius is innocent and that Peter Pettigrew is still alive. He dismisses their behavior as the result of dark magic, suggesting that they were not in control of their actions. As Snape continues to spin his narrative, Fudge listens with a mixture of concern and intrigue. He praises Snape for his efforts, even going so far as to suggest that Snape should be awarded the Order of Merlin, 2nd class, for his role in capturing Black. Snape, with his usual bitterness and arrogance, accepts the praise but uses the moment to criticize Harry's behavior, accusing him of being reckless and undisciplined. Snape points out that Harry has been allowed too much freedom by Dumbledore, which has emboldened him to break school rules and endanger himself and others. Throughout this conversation, Harry lies still, his mind struggling to process the gravity of what is being said. His body feels heavy and his eyelids are too weighted to lift easily. The words coming from the corridor travel slowly to his brain, as though they are being filtered through water. However, as he listens, a sense of unease grows in the pit of his stomach. Snape's words are casting a dark shadow over everything that Harry, Hermione, and Ron have done that night. Snape insinuates that the trio's actions may have allowed Black to escape, painting them as irresponsible children who need to be held accountable. Snape further drives home his point by suggesting that Harry has been given special treatment by Dumbledore, which has led to a high opinion of himself. He argues that any other student would have been suspended for the kinds of rule-breaking Harry has engaged in, sneaking out of the castle at night, consorting with a werewolf and a murderer, and breaking numerous school regulations designed for his protection. Snape's voice drips with contempt as he continues his tirade, and Harry's frustration builds as he realizes that his side of the story is being completely dismissed. Fudge, ever the bureaucrat, seems sympathetic but non-committal. He acknowledges that Harry has been foolish, but he is reluctant to criticize Harry too harshly, given the boy's fame and his tragic past. Harry's connection to the defeat of Voldemort and his status as the boy who lived continues to influence how he is treated by the Ministry, even when his actions are called into question. Fudge, like many others, has a blind spot when it comes to Harry, but this only fuels Snape's anger. The conversation between Fudge and Snape underscores the political tensions within the wizarding world, where personal biases, reputations, and public perceptions often take precedence over the truth. As Harry's mind begins to clear slightly, he realizes the gravity of the situation. His limbs still feel leaden and his head aches, but his thoughts are becoming sharper. The gnawing sensation in his stomach intensifies, signaling that something is terribly wrong. With great effort, Harry opens his eyes. His vision is blurred without his glasses, but he manages to make out his surroundings. The hospital wing is dimly lit, and he can see Madame Pomfrey tending to someone at the far end of the room, likely Ron, who was injured during the night's events. To his right, Harry notices Hermione lying in the bed next to him. Her eyes are open, wide with fear, and she looks absolutely terrified. When she realizes that Harry is awake, she quickly presses a finger to her lips, signaling for him to stay quiet. Hermione then points toward the door of the hospital wing, which is slightly ajar, allowing the voices of Fudge and Snape to filter through. Harry, still struggling to fully wake up, listens more closely, trying to make sense of what he is hearing. The weight of the situation begins to dawn on him. Suddenly, Madame Pomfrey appears at Harry's bedside, carrying what seems to be the largest block of chocolate he has ever seen. She places it on the table next to him and starts breaking it into pieces with a small hammer. The sound of the hammer striking the chocolate is jarring, but it snaps Harry further out of his daze. He and Hermione both ask about Ron's condition, speaking in unison, their voices filled with concern. Madame Pomfrey, ever brisk and no-nonsense, assures them that Ron will live, though she looks grim. However, Harry's focus quickly shifts from Ron to the larger problem at hand. He pushes himself up, grabs his glasses, and reaches for his wand, determined to take action. "I need to see the headmaster," he says with urgency, but Madame Pomfrey tries to calm him, insisting that everything is under control. She tells him that Sirius Black is locked up securely, and the Dementors are preparing to perform the Dementor's Kiss, which will strip Sirius of his soul. At this news, Harry's heart leaps in panic. "What?" he yells, causing both himself and Hermione to jump out of bed in alarm. The sound of Harry's shout carries into the corridor, and within moments the door swings open, and Fudge and Snape enter the hospital wing, looking agitated. Fudge, concerned for Harry's well-being, asks Madame Pomfrey if Harry has had enough chocolate, a remedy for the effects of the Dementors. But Harry is not interested in chocolate. He is desperate to stop the Dementors from killing Sirius. In a rush of words, Harry tries to explain to Fudge that Sirius is innocent and that Peter Pettigrew is alive. He recounts what he and Hermione saw that night. Pettigrew, alive and disguised as Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, who escaped when Lupin transformed into a werewolf. Hermione joins in, backing up Harry's story, explaining that Pettigrew faked his own death and framed Sirius for his supposed murder. But Fudge, though polite, dismisses their claims as confusion. He tells Harry that he has been through a terrible ordeal and that he is not thinking clearly. Snape, meanwhile, seizes the opportunity to undermine Harry and Hermione further, claiming that Black has cast a Confundus charm on them. He paints them as delusional, manipulated by Sirius into believing a far-fetched story about Pettigrew's survival. Harry, growing more frantic, shouts that they are not confunded, but Snape continues to push his narrative, ignoring their pleas. Madame Pomfrey, trying to defuse the situation, insists that Harry and Hermione need rest and should not be distressed. She stuffs a large chunk of chocolate into Harry's mouth, hoping to calm him down. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, the door opens again and Dumbledore enters. His presence immediately commands attention, and the tension in the room shifts. Harry swallows the chocolate with difficulty and quickly jumps out of bed again, eager to tell Dumbledore about Sirius. But Madame Pomfrey, now at her wit's end, protests loudly, demanding to know whether this is a hospital wing or a place for endless interruptions. Dumbledore, ever calm and composed, apologizes to Madame Pomfrey, but insists that he needs to speak to Harry and Hermione alone. His request is direct, and despite the protests of Fudge and Snape, Dumbledore remains firm. He asks Fudge, Snape, and Madame Pomfrey to leave them for a private conversation. Snape is particularly resistant, arguing vehemently that Sirius Black is a murderer and should not be trusted. He reminds Dumbledore of the time when Black nearly killed him as a student, a memory that clearly still haunts Snape. Dumbledore, however, reassures Snape that he has not forgotten those events, and though Snape's anger is palpable, he reluctantly exits the room along with Fudge and Madame Pomfrey. As soon as they are alone, Harry and Hermione both begin speaking at once, and explaining that Sirius is telling the truth and that they saw Pettigrew escape. They recount the events in the Shrieking Shack, where Pettigrew revealed himself and then fled after Lupin transformed into a werewolf. Their words are rushed, desperate, as they try to make Dumbledore understand the urgency of the situation. Dumbledore listens carefully, but when they finish, he gently stops them. He explains that while he believes their story, there is no evidence to support it. The word of two 13-year-olds, no matter how sincere, will not be enough to convince the Ministry. Without Pettigrew in custody, their claims hold little weight, and the Ministry has already made up its mind. A street full of eyewitnesses swore they saw Sirius murder Pettigrew all those years ago, and even Dumbledore himself had testified that Sirius was the Potter's secret keeper. The Ministry's version of events is deeply ingrained, and without Pettigrew as proof, it would be impossible to exonerate Sirius. Dumbledore continues, explaining that while they know the truth, public perception and the Ministry's decision-making rely on hard evidence. He also mentions that Lupin, who could corroborate their story, is currently deep in the Forbidden Forest, transformed into a werewolf. By the time he is human again, it will be too late to save Sirius. Furthermore, Dumbledore notes that werewolves, despite their best intentions, are deeply mistrusted in the wizarding world, and Lupin's testimony would likely hold little sway. His friendship with Sirius would only serve to discredit his account in the eyes of the Ministry. As Harry listens to Dumbledore's reasoning, a feeling of helplessness washes over him. He had always believed that Dumbledore could solve any problem, no matter how dire, but now he realizes that even Dumbledore's influence has limits. The grim reality that the system is set against them becomes painfully clear. The hope that Dumbledore could intervene and fix everything fades away, leaving Harry with a sinking sense of defeat. Just when Harry is beginning to lose all hope, Dumbledore suddenly shifts his tone. He looks at Harry and Hermione with a piercing intensity and says, "What we need is more time." This statement seems cryptic at first, but it sparks a realization in Hermione. Her eyes widen and she gasps, exclaiming, "Oh!" Dumbledore nods, indicating that she understands what he is hinting at. Hermione quickly pulls out a long, thin chain from beneath her robes, revealing the Time Turner, a magical device she has been using all year to attend multiple classes scheduled at the same time. The Time Turner allows the user to travel back in time, and Dumbledore has just given them permission to use it for a much more critical purpose. With time running out, Dumbledore gives them precise instructions, Sirius is locked in Professor Flitwick's office on the 7th floor, the 13th window from the right of the West Tower. If they act quickly, they can save not just one, but two innocent lives, Sirius and Buckbeak. However, Dumbledore emphasizes the importance of secrecy. He warns them that they must not be seen by anyone, as tampering with time is one of the most dangerous and strictly regulated aspects of magic. Hermione nods in understanding, her face set with determination. Harry, still a little confused but trusting Dumbledore, prepares for the task ahead. Dumbledore turns to leave, locking them inside the hospital wing. As he checks his watch, he notes that it is 5 minutes to midnight, giving them just enough time to pull off the plan. His parting words, a good luck, linger in the air as the door closes behind him. With the hospital wing now eerily quiet, Harry turns to Hermione, still unsure of how they're supposed to save Sirius. Hermione, however, is already moving quickly. She throws the chain of the time turner around both their necks and explains to Harry that they will be going back 3 hours in time. Hermione then turns the tiny hourglass 3 times, and the world around them begins to blur. Harry experiences a strange sensation of being pulled backward through time. Everything around him, shapes, colors, and sounds, whirls past him in a dizzying blur. His stomach churns as they hurtle through the hours, and for a moment he feels disoriented. But just as quickly as the sensation begins, it ends. When everything comes back into focus, they find themselves standing in the Hogwarts entrance hall, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Harry looks around, bewildered, and tries to make sense of where, or rather when, they are. Hermione wastes no time in explaining that they have traveled back 3 hours to the time just before Buckbeak's scheduled execution. She urges Harry to follow her quickly and quietly, as they must remain unseen by their past selves and anyone else who might be wandering the castle. The enormity of their task begins to settle on Harry. Not only do they have to rescue Buckbeak, but they also have to save Sirius without altering any of the other events that have already occurred. The pair makes their way stealthily across the grounds, heading toward Hagrid's hut. They must wait for just the right moment to intervene. Along the way, they hear the familiar voices of their past selves as they approach Hagrid's cabin under the cover of the invisibility cloak. Harry and Hermione hide behind the greenhouse, watching as their earlier selves knock on Hagrid's door. The sensation of watching themselves from the shadows is unsettling and surreal. Harry whispers that this is the strangest thing they've ever done, and Hermione agrees, her face pale with tension. From their hiding spot, Harry and Hermione witness the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures arrive at Hagrid's hut. Among them is the executioner, McNair, who carries the deadly axe that will be used to execute Buckbeak. As the officials knock on Hagrid's door, Harry and Hermione prepare to take action. They know that if they free Buckbeak too soon, it will look suspicious, as though Hagrid had set him free. They must wait for the right moment, after the committee has seen Buckbeak tied up, but before the executioner strikes. Inside the cabin, Harry and Hermione hear the sounds of breaking china as Hagrid drops a milk jug in his distress. This sound is a cue they remember from earlier, signaling that events are unfolding as they should. However, their sense of urgency grows as the committee members step outside to begin the execution. McNair lifts his axe, but before he can bring it down, Harry and Hermione spring into action. They rush to untie Buckbeak from the fence, leading him into the cover of the nearby trees just as McNair comes outside. The timing is perfect. From the shadows, they watch as McNair becomes enraged, realizing that Buckbeak has somehow escaped. The officials are baffled, and Hagrid is beside himself with relief, though he tries to contain his emotions. Dumbledore, who had been overseeing the proceedings, suggests that the officials search the skies for Buckbeak rather than the grounds, subtly hinting that the hippogriff has flown off. The tension lifts slightly, but Harry and Hermione know their work is far from over. With Buckbeak safely hidden in the forest, Harry and Hermione turn their attention to the next part of their mission, saving Sirius. They lead Buckbeak deeper into the trees, out of sight from anyone who might be watching. As they walk, Harry reflects on the strange turn of events. He recalls the moment by the lake earlier that night when he saw a mysterious figure cast a powerful Patronus that saved him and Sirius from the Dementors. The figure had seemed so familiar, and Harry becomes increasingly convinced that the person he saw was his father. This thought preoccupies Harry as they continue to make their way through the forest. Hermione, focused on their immediate task, tries to keep them on track. She reminds Harry that they cannot interfere with other events. They can't risk being seen by their past selves, and they can't do anything that might change the course of history too drastically. Their sole focus must be on saving Buckbeak and Sirius. As they hide in the forest, waiting for the right moment to make their next move, they witness several key events unfold. First, they watch as Remus Lupin, unaware of the full moon's rising, transforms into a werewolf near the Whomping Willow. Lupin's transformation causes chaos, allowing Peter Pettigrew to escape. Though Harry is tempted to intervene, Hermione warns him that doing so could lead to disastrous consequences. They must let events play out as they already have. Finally, the moment comes for them to rescue Sirius. As night falls and the stars begin to twinkle in the sky, Harry and Hermione mount Buckbeak and fly up to the window of the tower where Sirius is imprisoned. The flight is tense and the stakes are incredibly high. If they are seen, everything could fall apart. Harry guides Buckbeak carefully, steering him toward the 13th window of the West Tower, just as Dumbledore instructed. When they reach the window, Harry taps on the glass to get Sirius's attention. Inside the small office, Sirius looks up, startled, his face pale and drawn after his time in captivity. He rushes to the window, his expression a mix of disbelief and hope. After a moment of struggle, Hermione uses the unlocking charm, Alohomora, to open the window, and Sirius climbs out, squeezing through the narrow frame. Sirius, though weak, is immensely grateful for what Harry and Hermione have done. He expresses his deep gratitude, but Harry and Hermione urge him to move quickly. Time is running out, and the Dementors could arrive at any moment. With one last glance at his rescuers, Sirius climbs onto Buckbeak's back. Harry, with a mix of emotions, helps guide Buckbeak as they take off into the night sky. The sound of Buckbeak's wings flapping is the only noise that breaks the stillness of the night as they soar higher and higher. For a brief moment, Harry feels a sense of victory. They have saved Sirius, and Buckbeak is free. But the relief is tempered by the knowledge that their mission is not yet complete. They still have to return to the hospital wing before anyone realizes they're gone. As they watch Sirius and Buckbeak disappear into the clouds, Harry and Hermione exchange a look of quiet determination. They've accomplished what they set out to do, but the night is far from over. After Sirius's escape, Harry and Hermione rush back to the hospital wing, taking care to avoid being seen. They arrive just in time, slipping back into their beds before anyone notices their absence. As they lie there, the weight of what they've done begins to settle in. They have changed the course of events, saving 2 innocent lives in the process. However, the future remains uncertain, and they know that there will be consequences to face in the days to come. The film does not feature the overheard conversation between Snape and Fudge, where Snape tries to paint Harry, Ron, and Hermione as deluded and bewitched by Sirius Black. The time-turner sequence in the book is also more complex. In contrast, the film condenses the sequence and places more emphasis on the major plot beats due to constraints in the runtime. Chapter 22. Owlpost Again. As they rush down the tightly spiraling stone staircase from the tower where Buckbeak took flight with Sirius, they are filled with adrenaline. Hermione glances at her watch nervously. There are only 10 minutes left before the deadline, and they can't afford to be caught. As they reach the bottom of the staircase, voices echo in the corridor and Harry and Hermione freeze, pressing themselves against the cold stone wall. The voices belong to Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, and Severus Snape. Snape, ever the sinister figure, is speaking in an eager, almost gleeful tone, discussing the fate of Sirius Black. He is hopeful that Dumbledore will not cause any difficulties, especially regarding Sirius's capture and subsequent execution. Fudge, preoccupied with the public relations disaster that has unfolded due to Black's escape from Azkaban, expresses his excitement at finally being able to inform the Daily Prophet that Sirius Black, the notorious fugitive, has been captured. He even suggests that Snape will be hailed as a hero in the press, especially once Harry recovers and tells his story. Harry seethes with anger upon hearing Snape's smug tone, but he and Hermione remain hidden, holding their breath as Snape and Fudge pass them. Once the coast is clear, they slip out from their hiding place and continue running through the dark, winding corridors of Hogwarts, moving as quickly and silently as possible. They narrowly avoid being discovered by Peeves the poltergeist, whose maniacal cackling echoes down the halls. Peeves seems particularly excited by the events of the night, relishing the idea of the Dementors closing in to deliver the dreaded Dementor's kiss to Sirius. Peeves's high-pitched laughter makes Hermione shudder, and they quickly dive into a deserted classroom to avoid him. As the ghost's gleeful noises fade into the distance, Hermione anxiously checks her watch once again. Only 3 minutes remain. Harry's heart pounds in his chest as they sprint down the final corridor toward the hospital wing. Panic creeps in when they hear Dumbledore's voice, calmly informing Madame Pomfrey that he is about to lock the door for the night. Just as the door swings shut and the headmaster lifts his wand to lock it, Harry and Hermione rush forward. They are breathless, but just in time. Dumbledore, his long silver beard catching the dim light of the hallway, turns to them with a knowing smile. Harry, still catching his breath, eagerly announces that they have succeeded. Sirius has escaped on Buckbeak. Dumbledore beams at the news, clearly pleased by their success. He congratulates them quietly before quickly urging them to slip back into the hospital wing before anyone notices their absence. Inside the ward, the atmosphere is markedly calmer. Ron is still unconscious, lying in the far bed after being attacked by Sirius in his attempt to reach Scabbers, and the room is otherwise empty save for the sounds of Madame Pomfrey bustling about. Harry and Hermione silently return to their beds, and Hermione discreetly tucks the time turner back under her robes, hiding the evidence of their incredible journey through time. The soft click of the door being magically locked behind them marks the end of their mission. Madame Pomfrey re-emerges, clearly irritable, demanding to know if the headmaster has finally left. She fusses over Harry and Hermione, forcing them to eat large quantities of chocolate to help them recover from their supposed encounter with Dementors earlier that evening. Harry, however, can barely focus on eating, his thoughts racing as he waits for the inevitable chaos to erupt once Snape discovers that Sirius has escaped. It doesn't take long. A sudden roar of fury, so loud and intense that it reverberates through the stone walls of the castle, shatters the stillness. Madame Pomfrey jumps in alarm, her expression face twisted in fury, followed closely by Fudge and Dumbledore. While Fudge looks flustered and angry, Dumbledore remains as calm and serene as ever, almost as if he's enjoying the show. But Snape is far from calm. He is livid, consumed with the belief that Harry and Hermione are responsible for Sirius's escape. Spittle flies from his mouth as he accuses Harry of helping Sirius and demands that they confess. Madame Pomfrey, scandalized by Snape's behavior, shrieks at him to control himself. But Snape is beyond reason. He points an accusatory finger at Harry and Hermione, his voice rising to an almost hysterical pitch as he claims they have somehow helped Sirius escape. His anger is palpable, and Fudge, witnessing the spectacle, looks bewildered and concerned by Snape's irrational behavior. Dumbledore, with his usual quiet authority, steps in to de-escalate the situation. He calmly points out that the door has been locked since he left, and that Madame Pomfrey herself can attest that neither Harry nor Hermione has left their beds. Snape, however, refuses to be reasoned with. He insists that they must have had a hand in the escape, despite the lack of any logical evidence. But Dumbledore remains firm, stating that unless Snape can explain how Harry and Hermione could have been in two places at once, his accusations are baseless. Snape, trembling with frustration and rage, is forced to back down, but his hatred for Harry is more apparent than ever. He storms out of the ward, his black robes swirling dramatically behind him. As he leaves, Fudge remarks that Snape seems quite unbalanced, but Dumbledore quietly assures him that Snape has merely suffered a great disappointment, referring to the fact that Snape will not be receiving the Order of Merlin for capturing Sirius. Fudge, still distressed by the events of the night, laments that the Daily Prophet will have a field day with the story of Black's escape. He is also concerned about the escape of Buckbeak, the hippogriff, which could lead to further embarrassment for the Ministry. Dumbledore gently suggests that the Dementors should be removed from the school, given their attempt to administer the Dementor's kiss on an innocent boy, and Fudge agrees, though he is distracted and muttering about finding a new security measure for the school, perhaps involving dragons. After Fudge and Dumbledore leave the ward, Madame Pomfrey locks the door again, clearly exasperated by the chaos of the evening. At that moment, Ron stirs and slowly wakes up, groggy and confused. He has no recollection of the dramatic events that transpired, and he asks Harry and Hermione what happened. They glance at each other, unsure of how much to explain, but Harry begins to recount the night's events while Ron listens in disbelief. The next day, Harry, Ron, and Hermione leave the hospital wing around noon to find that the castle is unusually quiet. The weather is hot, and most of the students have taken advantage of the Hogsmeade visit. The trio, still discussing the previous night's events, wanders outside onto the grounds, seeking some peace and reflection. They sit by the lake, watching the giant squid lazily wave its tentacles above the water's surface. But Harry's mind is elsewhere. He can't stop thinking about the spot across the lake where the familiar Patronus appeared the night before to drive away the Dementors. As they sit quietly, lost in thought, Hagrid approaches, his face flushed and sweaty from the heat. He looks uncharacteristically cheerful and explains that he's been celebrating all night because Buckbeak has escaped. The news of Buckbeak's freedom lifts their spirits, and Hagrid happily rambles on about how he knew something had gone wrong when Buckbeak wasn't properly tied up. However, Hagrid's mood shifts slightly when he mentions that Professor Lupin has resigned. This news comes as a shock to Harry, who is deeply upset that his favourite teacher is leaving. Hagrid, in his usual tactless manner, casually explains that Snape told all the Slytherins about Lupin being a werewolf. Now, Lupin feels he has no choice but to resign. Determined to speak to Lupin before he leaves, Harry rushes off to his office. When Harry arrives, he finds Lupin packing his things. The Grindillo that once occupied a tank in his office is gone, and the room feels empty and sad. Lupin confirms the rumors. He is indeed resigning. He explains that after the events of the previous night, and now that his werewolf identity is public knowledge, it's only a matter of time before parents demand his resignation. He tells Harry that it's too dangerous for him to stay at Hogwarts, especially after nearly biting someone during his transformation. Harry protests, insisting that Lupin is the best defense against the dark arts teacher they've ever had. But Lupin, though touched by Harry's words, is resolute. He expresses pride in Harry's accomplishments, particularly in his ability to produce a powerful Patronus. He also reveals that James Potter, Harry's father, was a stag animagus, which is why Harry's Patronus took the form of a stag. Lupin returns the invisibility cloak and the Marauder's map to Harry, no longer feeling the need to keep them now that he's leaving the school. Their conversation is interrupted by Dumbledore, who arrives to see Lupin off. After Lupin's departure, Dumbledore stays behind to speak with Harry. He offers Harry some much-needed comfort, reminding him that, despite everything, he did a noble thing by saving Pettigrew's life. Dumbledore also acknowledges the prophecy made by Professor Trelawney during Harry's divination exam, confirming that it may indeed have been a true prediction. While Harry is troubled by the possibility that Pettigrew may now return to Voldemort, Dumbledore reassures him that he has created a bond between himself and Pettigrew by saving his life, a bond that could one day work in Harry's favour. As the school year comes to an end, Harry is left with a mixture of emotions. Though Gryffindor wins the House Cup and the end-of-year feast is a joyous occasion, Harry can't shake the feeling of loss. He is saddened by Lupin's departure and worried about the future, particularly about the return of Voldemort. On the Hogwarts Express back to London, Hermione surprises Harry and Ron by announcing that she has dropped Muggle studies and returned the Time Turner. She explains that the stress of managing so many classes with the Time Turner was too much, and she's looking forward to having a more normal schedule next year. The conversation turns to the upcoming Quidditch World Cup, and Ron excitedly invites Harry to stay with his family over the summer so they can attend the event together. As the train nears London, a small owl arrives at their compartment, struggling under the weight of a letter addressed to Harry. The letter is from Sirius, who informs Harry that he is safe and in hiding with Buckbeak. Sirius also reveals that he was the one who sent Harry the Firebolt as a gift, and he includes a permission slip allowing Harry to visit Hogsmeade next year. Ron is thrilled when Sirius offers him the tiny owl as a gift, and the three friends share a moment of happiness as they head home for the summer. When they arrive at King's Cross Station, Harry is greeted by Uncle Vernon, who is clearly displeased to see him. But Harry, feeling emboldened by the letter from Sirius, hints to his uncle that his godfather, a convicted murderer, is keeping an eye on him. With this, Harry walks away from the station, feeling a sense of triumph and looking forward to a better summer than the last. Again, the scene of Cornelius Fudge being in the hospital wing is pretty much omitted. Another major difference is the film's omission of Professor Lupin's resignation after his werewolf identity is revealed. Additionally, the letter from Sirius, where he explains sending Harry the Firebolt and grants him permission to visit Hogsmeade, is given more prominence in the book compared to the film. The film also ends with Harry flying away on his newly acquired Firebolt, while the book ends at King's Cross Station. And when you get the chance, check out our Game of Thrones-inspired Choose Your Own Adventure game here on YouTube by clicking the video link on the screen right now.